Chapter 761, Black Dragon Prince. When Ethan Koye carefully emerged from the ground, he found himself in a spacious cave. This cave resembled a huge warehouse filled with all kinds of sundries, including weapons, armor, and various gold and silver treasures. Ha! Seeing this, Ethan let out a long sigh of relief, feeling lucky that he had made the right bet. Just as he was about to raise his head and look around the magnificent cave, his perception suddenly detected something strange. There were other people in this cave. The next moment, Ethan's eyes were firmly attracted by a slender black shadow. "Damn it!" Ethan exclaimed. It was another unfamiliar voice. It was an elegant black dragon, rummaging intently among the debris. Ethan's sudden appearance obviously broke the atmosphere. In fact, Ethan was not the only one who was frightened. The dragon was also startled. He glanced at the entrance of the cave in panic, as if to confirm whether his whereabouts had been discovered by the guards outside. After confirming that the two guards were not disturbed, he relaxed slightly. Ethan noticed the dragon's caution and couldn't help but think, "Oh, it seems that this uninvited guest also sneaked in through some unknown secret passage." The black dragon also reacted and understood the current situation. He immediately turned around and looked down at Ethan with a majestic attitude, his orange vertical pupils full of vigilance and inquiry. "Mortal, who are you?" His voice was low and powerful, echoing in the cave. "How did you break into this sacred lair?" Facing his scrutinizing posture, Ethan was not intimidated at all. He faced those majestic dragon eyes without fear, a sarcastic smile on his lips. "It seems that I should ask you this question. Who are you? Why did you sneak into Lord Neltharion's territory when he was not around?" His tone was full of provocation. "Could it be that you are a black dragon with evil intentions?" "Stop." Nefarian almost blurted out a roar, but swallowed it hard. He suddenly remembered the two loyal dragon captains at the door, so he hurriedly lowered his voice. "How ridiculous! I, as the eldest son of Earth Guardian Neltharion and the legal heir of the Black Dragon Legion, everything here will belong to me sooner or later." Ethan looked at the childish yet majestic black dragon in front of him and couldn't help but feel amused. He had already made some guesses about the identity of the self-proclaimed heir. "Oh, Neltharion's eldest son?" He introduced himself with a smile. "I am Druid Ethan Koye. Since you are the orthodox successor of the Black Dragon Legion, you might as well tell me your name." Hearing this, the black dragon raised his head proudly, as if he wanted to carve his noble identity into every inch of his skin. "Humph, mortal, listen to me. I, Nefarian, am the eldest son of the Black Dragon King Neltharion and the Dragon Queen Sinestra, and the undisputed orthodox successor of the Black Dragon Legion." His words were full of unquestionable majesty, as if he was not a prince, but the king of the Black Dragon, and the entire Black Dragon Legion was already under his control. "You're just a mortal. You'd better show some respect." Ethan listened to Nefarian's self-introduction, and his heart moved. Sure enough, it was him, Nefarian. This name was not unfamiliar to him. Aren't these the brothers and sisters of his cheap dragon maid? Ethan looked at the black dragon in front of him and couldn't help but feel a little amused. "Oh, that's amazing," Ethan said in an indifferent tone while applauding perfunctorily, a teasing smile on his lips. "Then, noble Prince Nefarian, can you tell me why you sneaked into your father's treasure house when he was away?" As he spoke, he pretended to poke his head out curiously, as if he was trying to pry into the secret behind Nefarian. This simple action made Nefarian nervous. He hurriedly moved his huge dragon body, trying to cover the pile of debris behind him. "Was trying to steal from my father's treasure trove. I caught him in the act and am now dealing with the intruder." Ethan, who had been observing the situation with a calm demeanor, finally spoke up. "Nefarian, you are quick to accuse, but do you have any proof of your claims?" His voice was steady, unyielding, and carried a hint of challenge. Nefarian's eyes narrowed, his pride wounded by Ethan's calm defiance. "Proof? You dare question me, mortal? My word is proof enough." Ethan shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "Words are wind, young prince. Actions speak louder, and from where I stand, it seems you are the one acting suspiciously." The two dragon captains exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. They were torn between their loyalty to the prince and the logic in Ethan's words. Nefarian, sensing the shift in their demeanor, roared in frustration. Enough! I will not be questioned by a mere human. Prepare to face the wrath of the Black Dragon Legion. With that, Nefarian unleashed another torrent of shadow flame dragon's breath, aiming directly at Ethan. The cave once again lit up with the fierce red glow of the flames. Ethan, however, was prepared. With a swift motion, he conjured a protective barrier, deflecting the flames away from him. The force of the impact sent shockwaves through the cave, causing the ground to tremble. The dragon captains, witnessing Ethan's display of power, hesitated. They had never seen a mortal withstand such an attack from a dragon, let alone counter it with such ease. Nefarian, Ethan called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. You underestimate me. I am not just any mortal. I have faced greater threats than you and emerged victorious. If you continue this path, it will only lead to your downfall. Nefarian's eyes blazed with fury, but there was a flicker of doubt. He had never encountered a human with such strength and confidence. For a moment, he considered retreating, but his pride would not allow it. Very well, mortal, Nefarian snarled. If you wish to challenge me, then so be it. But know this, you will regret ever crossing paths with the Black Dragon Legion. Ethan stood his ground, unwavering. We shall see, young prince. We shall see. The tension in the cave was palpable as the two adversaries faced off, each determined to prove their strength. The dragon captains watched in silence, unsure of what the outcome would be, but knowing that this battle would be one for the ages. Dared to sneak into my father's lair through the back door and attempt to steal our treasure. However, they have been punished as they deserve. I have already dealt with them with my own hands. Haha, Nefarian, did you speak too soon? A light voice emerged from the blazing shadow flames. Ethan, who had been completely swallowed by the sea of fire just moments ago, reappeared before Nefarian's eyes, unharmed. A mocking smile played on his lips, as if he were teasing a kitten, which only served to infuriate Nefarian further, causing his blood pressure to spike. What are you two still doing? Hurry! Summon all the guards immediately, and join me in annihilating this shameless thief. Nefarian roared, his voice echoing through the cave. The two dragon captains, who had been guarding the entrance to Neltharian's treasure house for a long time, exchanged a knowing glance. Their status in the Black Dragon Legion was naturally extraordinary. Although they were warriors with no spell-casting abilities, their dragon bloodline granted them basic spell-casting powers, making them much stronger than ordinary warriors. One of the warriors quickly cast a protective energy spell on himself, surrounding him with a faint energy shield. Clenching the enchanted long axe in his hand, anger flashed in his eyes as he charged towards Ethan without hesitation. The scales of the dragon people, inherited from the Black Dragon, made them naturally resistant to shadow flames. With the added protection of the spell, this dragon warrior was even more formidable. Even within the Black Dragon's flame breath, he could still fight tenaciously, greatly enhancing his ability to collaborate with Nefarian. His quick and precise reaction revealed him to be a veteran who had fought alongside the Black Dragon for many years. The other dragon warrior chose a different course of action. Without a word, he turned and ran out of the cave, intending to summon all nearby dragon guards for reinforcements. Despite his loud shouting, no dragon guards appeared. Chapter 762. Nefarian Gets Scared Instantly. The dragons were unaware that the reinforcements they had been eagerly awaiting, the dragon guards, had already been eliminated by Ethan in advance when he infiltrated the area. That's the beauty of Assassin's Creed-style stealth. Don't waste your efforts. No one will respond to you, Ethan said in a mocking tone. Since you miss them so much, I will reunite you soon. As he spoke, he extended his hand towards the two dragon men, as if making an inviting gesture. However, this was not a friendly gesture, but a prelude to a spell. Suddenly, the earth trembled and thick vines burst out from the ground like an awakened giant beast, tightly restraining the two dragon captains who were charging and retreating. These vines were covered with sharp barbs, like natural chains, locking them tightly. In the previous verbal confrontation, not only was Nefarian secretly gathering dragon breath, but Ethan was also quietly preparing his spell. Nefarian didn't understand natural magic, so Ethan had catalyzed several poisonous blood vines under his opponent's nose and hidden them underground in the cavity he had just dug. This is why, even in a bare cave, which is the most unsuitable environment for a druid to fight, Ethan could summon plants for combat. At first, the two dragon captains could rely on their enchanted armor to resist the barbs on the vines. The silver armor was worthy of its gorgeous appearance and temporarily withstood the damage. But Ethan was not in a hurry. He continued to cast spells and added the effect of rusted claws to the vines. This spell could quickly make metal rust and lose its original luster and strength. It is a trump card used by druids to deal with heavily armed enemies. Under the influence of rusted claw, the armor on the two dragon captains began to change. The originally shiny silver armor gradually became stained with mottled rust, as if it was aging at a rate hundreds or thousands of times faster. As the traces of rust became denser, the strong armor began to make a subtle click sound under the tight grip of the blood vine, as if it might break at any moment. Shameless intruder, you will never succeed. Nefarian realized that something was wrong. If Ethan's spell was allowed to destroy the armor, the two dragon men would be directly harmed by the blood vine. Whether it was poison or physical squeeze, the dragon's mortal body could not withstand such a thick blood vine. And once the dragon men lost their resistance, he alone could not defeat the druid in front of him. Seeing that the situation was dire, the Prince of the Black Dragon Legion immediately adjusted his strategy. He lowered his flight altitude, took a deep breath, and sprayed high-temperature flames from his mouth again. However, this time his target was not Ethan, but the vines that bound the dragon captains. Nefarian accurately controlled the landing point of the flames, making them fall precisely on the vines, trying not to let them affect the two draconians. The vines burned by the flames seemed to feel severe pain. They twisted and spasmed violently, but even so, they still tightly bound the two dragon captains, who were gradually losing their resistance. The corner of Ethan's mouth curled up with a hint of contempt, and he said sarcastically, "Do you only rely on dragon's breath?" In fact, Ethan knew very well that dragons were born with powerful spellcasting abilities, but they rarely used destructive spells, often preferring to use their own dragon breath because it was both direct and extremely destructive. For them, their dragon's breath was more useful than any other spell. But in front of Ethan, Nefarian's dragon breath did not work well. Ethan snapped his fingers lightly. In an instant, the druid's spell was suddenly launched in the cave, and a violent air current formed instantly, turning into a raging storm. The tornado soared into the sky with devastating power, ravaging everything in the cave crazily. Nefarian was forced to retreat temporarily by the sudden storm. Being underage, his body was not strong enough to withstand the fierce winds, which could easily break his wings. As he dodged, the dragon's breath that had been continuously spewing out was abruptly interrupted. The flames covering the vines were quickly blown away by the strong wind, disappearing without a trace. Seeing that the enchanted armor on the two dragon captains had been completely corroded, Ethan Quaya's eyes narrowed, and he clenched his right hand tightly. At the same time, the thick vines seemed to receive an order and suddenly exerted force. Crack! Click! Click! With a harsh, crisp sound, the remaining armor was easily broken into rusty pieces, like opened potato chips. The thick blood vines wrapped around the two dragon captains like pythons, binding them tightly. Without the structural support of the armor, the dragon people's strength was significantly weakened under the constraints of the blood vine. To make matters worse, the spikes on the blood vine easily penetrated their hard scales, injecting deadly poison into their strong muscles. Soon, the two dragonmen felt a strong sense of powerlessness. The toxins were rapidly eroding their strength, making them extremely weak. Their once powerful strength was now gone, leaving them unable to resist. Ethan looked at all this coldly, clenched his fists, and then pressed them down suddenly. After receiving the master's order, the vines exerted force again, pulling the two dragon captains into the soil without mercy. Along with their unwilling screams, soon no more sounds were heard in the cave. Meanwhile, Ethan was distracted by another raging storm. Nefarian rushed left and right in the strong wind, trying to find a breakthrough, but was mercilessly pushed back every time. Seeing Nefarian's embarrassed appearance, Ethan's face gradually showed a kind smile. "Now, can we sit down and have a nice chat?" "Damn it, you are actually the legendary Ethan Quaya." Nefarian's eyes widened, staring at the druid in front of him in disbelief. Forced into the form of a night elf, Nefarian's face was filled with grievance. This little black dragon prince, used to being domineering, had never encountered such a powerful human opponent. When he first heard Ethan's name, he didn't react. However, after a fierce battle with Ethan and being tortured to pieces, he suddenly realized that this druid was the one who transformed into a phoenix in front of the dragons and once single-handedly resisted Neltharion, who was holding the dragon's soul, a true warrior. "So you weren't bragging before," Nefarian muttered to himself with a wry smile. How could he deal with someone strong enough to stand up to his father? In Ethan's eyes, Nefarian was just a naughty child who had not yet reached adulthood. His strength was still far behind that of a standard adult dragon, let alone comparable to his old rival, Neltharion. Recalling the previous fierce battle with Neltharion, Ethan was almost always in a state of being unilaterally suppressed. But for him, this battle was not just a shame, it was a rare honor. After all, not everyone has the opportunity to fight against a powerful demigod armed with an artifact and still stand tall after the battle is over. "Why, are you scared now?" Ethan smiled and mocked. "If you are willing to beg for mercy now, I might consider letting you go." Nefarian's eyes widened, and he clenched his fist tightly, but then loosened it weakly. He knew very well that he was no match for Ethan at this moment. But Black Dragon's pride and dignity would not allow him to easily submit. "Humph, don't be complacent," Nefarian gritted his teeth and said, "One day I will make you pay the price." Ethan did not continue to make things difficult for Nefarian, but instead focused on the real purpose of his trip, the items he planned to steal. He opened a book casually and frowned slightly. Ethan seemed quite interested in the contents of the book. So, he looked up at the black dragon prince in front of him, a playful smile on his lips. "You took such a big risk and honor to sneak into Neltharian's lair just to steal these precious books from his treasure pile." At Ethan's request, Nefarian had now transformed into the form of a night elf, with long black hair as smooth as a waterfall and bright orange eyes. He lowered his eyes slightly, seeming a little embarrassed to admit Ethan's guess. "Yes," he whispered, "I am interested in both knowledge and technology. My father always thinks that my research is a waste of time, but I believe physical growth is limited. Only through continuous exploration and learning can we become stronger." Ethan listened to Nefarian's words and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. He had long known that Nefarian was a research madman with a fanatical pursuit of knowledge and technology, but he did not expect that this persistent spirit had been deeply rooted in his heart 10 years ago. But recently, everything has changed. At this point, Nefarian sighed deeply, frowning, and the depression in his heart was difficult to resolve. Just recently, he suddenly brought back many four-colored dragon corpses and ordered me to study how to combine their advantages to create a new dragon clan. Nefarian seemed to have been holding some things in his heart for a long time. Perhaps because of his record, Ethan, who had fought against Neltharion, was regarded by Nefarian as a warrior who was not afraid of Deathwing and a confidant willing to listen to his voice. So, the young black dragon prince poured out all his emotional turmoil. "My father doesn't understand the true meaning of research at all. He just urges me to speed up the progress but ignores that this kind of research, which goes beyond common sense, requires time and patience. How could it be possible to achieve significant results in just a few years?" He continued to talk about his inner struggle. "What's more, I have no enmity with these dragon compatriots, but every time I work with their corpses, I always feel an indescribable sense of guilt. Additionally, my mother chose to leave because she couldn't bear my father's torture." Chapter 763. Taking advantage of the situation. Ethan was surprised by Elise's determination. He could not imagine that this upper-class elf girl, who had lived a carefree aristocratic life not long ago, could mature so quickly and show such firm resolve when faced with the challenge of being separated from her family. "Hey," Ethan sighed helplessly. I don't object to you staying in the military camp, and I am willing to vouch for you, but I really hope you can think it through again. He reached out his hand and gently rubbed Elise's stubborn hair, his eyes filled with the care of an elder. Believe me, he said earnestly, the war with the Burning Legion will not last long. Maybe everything will be settled before you actually step onto the battlefield. Seeing that Elise's lips were slightly parted, as if she wanted to give an answer immediately, Ethan gently put his finger in front of her lips to signal her to calm down. Don't rush to give an answer. Impulsive decisions are often regrettable. I will give you half a month to think it over, to experience the cruelty of the battlefield for yourself, and to understand the enemies you may face in the future. I hope that in half a month you can give me a clear answer after thinking calmly. After saying this, he gently patted Elise's slightly unwilling head, a gentle smile on his face. If you still insist on your original intention at that time, he promised, as long as you are willing, I can ask Tyrande to personally guide you and help you grow. This can also be regarded as a little bit of feedback for our contribution to the Sunstrider family. Elise didn't like Ethan's comforting gestures, which felt like treating her as a child. She quickly and decisively slapped Ethan's hand away, a hint of displeasure on her face. Please don't do this to me. I have grown up, she pouted. Besides, there is no need to trouble Miss Tyrande. My parents have said that the Sunchaser family voluntarily bears such risks, and everything we do is for the future of the Night Elves. After hearing this, Ethan couldn't help but laugh. He admired Elise's determination and maturity, so he said gently, Of course, I understand your sacrifice and dedication, but this matter is not something you can decide alone. I have my own discretion. Turning to look at Jared, who was standing aside, Ethan spread out his hands and said in a relaxed and sincere manner, So Jared, what do you think? I am willing to vouch for Elise. Can we let her stay in our military camp temporarily? Jared looked into Ethan's serious eyes, then glanced at Elise standing aside. He shook his head helplessly and said with a wry smile, You have already made up your mind. What else can I say? However, I hope you can tell me more about Miss Sunchaser later. No problem. Neltharion? Ethan suddenly mentioned this name after listening to Jared's sharing of Asseline's internal intelligence. As his emotions fluctuated, Nefarion's words became fewer and fewer, and his eyes gradually became hollow and confused. After experiencing the drastic change in his father's temperament, the death of his mother, and the heavy pressure of research, the young Black Dragon Master had shown a slight tendency towards autism. Ethan listened quietly to Nefarion's complaints without interrupting, but his mind was not completely immersed in these trivial grievances. He stared at Nefarion's face, the face full of resentment and displeasure, and thought to himself, This child seems to have not been completely corrupted. Although under the subtle influence of Neltharion, he may have some cunning little thoughts, but maybe there's room for redemption. Okay, let's stop for a moment, Ethan interrupted Nefarion's muttering. He shrugged and said easily, There are more and more repeated complaints in your words. That's about it for venting. Now, do you feel better? Hey. Nefarion looked up at the sky, depressed, and sighed longingly. What can be good, although my father used to be very strict, but at least we could get along with each other. Now Ethan shook his head, leaving his sentence unfinished. However, Nefarion understood the meaning behind his words. Have you ever thought deeply about why the once kind and steady Black Dragon King transformed into what he is now? Ethan asked, staring at Nefarion with a hint of curiosity. Nefarion curled his lips helplessly and responded, Of course, I have thought about this. There are rumors that some unknown secrets are hidden deep in my father's lair. My mother and other tribesmen have warned me to stay away from that strange place. Ethan gently patted the earth beneath him, baked by the underground magma, and said with a serious expression, Do you really think that just staying away from this so-called source can solve all problems? Can you, or the entire Black Dragon clan, disobey Neltharion's orders? He paused before continuing. If Neltharion forces you to continue these cruel experiments that violate dragon ethics, are you confident that you can maintain a clear mind after 1,000, 3,000, or even 10,000 years? Can you avoid being corrupted by his madness? Nefarian's brows furrowed slightly, and the clouds that had originally enveloped his face seemed to dissipate, revealing a rare solemnity. "What exactly are you trying to say?" he asked in a deep voice, with a hint of curiosity and caution. "What I want to say is very simple," Ethan smiled softly, a mysterious light flashing in his eyes. "If you and all the Black Dragons want to get rid of Neltharion, or even the Master who secretly controls him, you must have a clear and firm plan for the future." Nefarian's eyes sharpened as he seemed to grasp the deeper meaning in Ethan's words. "Should you choose to resist or surrender, this decision is crucial because it will guide your future actions." Ethan's tone became serious and firm. "I suggest you make a choice as soon as possible. The being who controls Neltharion will not give you much time. His ambition extends far beyond a powerful Black Dragon King. His goal is to enslave the entire Black Dragon clan." After Ethan's persuasive words, Nefarian was finally moved. The reason Ethan was able to successfully convince the young Black Dragon, who might become a future overlord, is not complicated. Firstly, Nefarian is still young, with great ambitions, but not deeply involved in the world, making his mind less solid and easier to sway. Secondly, Ethan's past glorious achievements add significant weight to his words. Most importantly, Ethan has earned Nefarian's respect with his strength. The combat effectiveness he displayed in their contest deeply impressed the Black Dragon, who values strength. However, Nefarian still harbored doubts about Ethan's words and would occasionally squint at the human, trying to read more information from his expression. But when he saw no murderous intent in Ethan's eyes, only sincerity and trust, his guard gradually dropped. Nefarian calmly picked up a pile of heavy slate books, which contained various magical knowledge and were part of his father Neltharian's collection. He then slowly left through the back door of the lair, a secret passage hidden behind a seemingly solid mountain wall. "It turns out the back door is so cleverly hidden," Ethan remarked, realizing that the seemingly indestructible mountain wall was just an illusion. Behind it was a huge cave, through which Nefarian, even in his dragon form, easily passed and disappeared on the other side. Ethan stood there watching Nefarian leave, then turned around, his eyes filled with determination. Ethan fell upon the vast treasure left by Neltharion. The gleaming gold shone attractively under the firelight, and Ethan's face displayed unconcealable joy. "Now," Ethan said with satisfaction, "all these things are mine." The Black Dragon tribe on the continent of Azeroth, or rather most of the dragons, are very different from their counterparts in other worlds, particularly in their attitude towards wealth. The dragons here are not keen on filling their lairs with shiny treasures. They value strength and wisdom more than simple material wealth. However, not paying attention to it does not mean they do not collect it at all. As one of the 5 most powerful guardian dragons in the world, Neltharian's treasure is naturally no small matter. Over the years, he carefully collected many rare treasures, the most precious of which are the ancient Titan tablets that were taken away by Nefarian. These tablets are engraved with long-lost Titan magic and knowledge. Of course, apart from those stone slabs, the value of other items cannot be underestimated. In this seemingly messy pile of treasures, gold, silver, and jewelry are only a small part of it. What is truly attractive are the weapons and equipment imbued with powerful magic, as well as some mysterious objects that exude astonishing energy fluctuations. Ethan stood in front of the treasures, his eyes wandering over them, but he was not interested in the metal armor. Whether as a mage or a druid, he was not accustomed to wearing armor. Wearing metal armor would greatly limit his spellcasting flexibility and effectiveness in combat. Despite this, Ethan also knew the value of this equipment. Since Neltharion was the enemy anyway, he did not hesitate to put these treasures into his own space package. Chapter 764, Igrul. Why so many two-handed weapons? Is this Neltharion's special preference? Ethan murmured to himself as he packed up the treasure trove, his eyes wandering among the metal artifacts in the room. Among the Black Dragon King's treasures, excluding the unknown objects whose origin and effect cannot be identified for the time being, most of them were metal utensils. Two-handed weapons seemed to be particularly favored by the Black Dragon King. He had discovered at least a dozen during his search, each one appearing heavy and powerful. As he turned over a hefty two-handed sword, his movements suddenly froze. His gaze was drawn to a peculiar scimitar. The scimitar was quietly embedded in the ground, exuding an indescribable charm. "Huh? This is—" Ethan murmured softly, squatting down to examine the scimitar closely. With this weird shape, could it be? The shape of the scimitar was unique and bizarre. The guard and the blade were seamlessly connected, as if they were forged from a single piece of metal. The handguard was covered with sharp barbs, as if to warn anyone who wanted to wield it that this weapon could be as dangerous to the user as it was to the enemy. But the most eye-catching feature was undoubtedly the large purple eyeball inlaid in the center of the handle. It stared at Ethan quietly, exuding a mysterious and strange aura. The eyeball seemed to have a life of its own, which sent an inexplicable chill down Ethan's spine. At the same time, he felt a strange aura emanating from the scimitar. This aura reminded him of the fierce battle with Neltharion. It was a chilling aura full of corruption, similar to that of the Black Dragon King, but different, making him feel fearful and uneasy. Ethan recognized the knife immediately. His eyes were fixed on the unique scimitar, and he was shocked. He would never mistake this knife. In the memory of his previous life, there were many artifacts in World of Warcraft, but among so many artifacts, this knife left a deep impression on him with its uniqueness. It was the Blade of Xal'atath, Dark Empire, a legendary artifact belonging to the Shadow Priest in the game, and one of the few weapons that had self-awareness and could speak. Legend had it that this scimitar was forged from the claws of an ancient god who was defeated in ancient times. Although this statement could not be verified, the power it contained was unquestionable. After the Titan Guardians destroyed the Dark Empire created by the old gods, this scimitar seemed to disappear into the dust of history. Until one day, a Gurubashi priest who lost in the power struggle accidentally discovered it, or perhaps, more accurately, was chosen by it. At this moment, as if sensing Ethan's powerful spiritual energy, the surface of the blade of the Dark Empire began to flash with a resonant purple shimmer, as if it was trying to communicate, calling softly. "Ha ha!" Ethan chuckled, but did not act rashly. For those who were unaware, encountering an artifact like Xal'atath might be a thrilling adventure, and they might reach out and pull out this legendary weapon without hesitation. But Ethan knew Xal'atath's true nature well, so he chose to ignore the tempting call for the time being, maintaining due caution and distance. A soft click sound suddenly came from behind Ethan. This sudden noise immediately heightened his alertness. He turned around quickly and saw a Drogbar wearing simple armor suddenly burst out from the ground. The soil he brought up when he emerged had not yet settled. Ethan guessed that this was probably a spell such as Earth Escape Technique or Stone Movement Technique. He secretly marveled at the Drogbar's Earth Elemental talents, a creation of the Earth Element Titan. Seeing Ethan's guarded stance, the Drogbar quickly raised his hands to show that he had no ill intentions. He smiled weakly and said in Kaldore, "Friend, please relax. I am not your enemy." Compared to other Drogbars who had difficulty speaking, this one seemed more articulate. The language he encountered, before, this Drogbal's Kaldore language, was obviously much more fluent. Upon seeing this, Ethan's tense nerves relaxed a little, but he still didn't completely let down his guard. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the other person, with a hint of inquiry in his tone. "Who are you? Are you here specifically to see me?" The Drogbal nodded and replied affirmatively, "Yes, I am here just for you." As he spoke, his eyes glanced around inadvertently. He was secretly surprised by the ground that was damaged beyond recognition by the dragon's breath and the two large dirt mounds that had obviously just been turned over. All of this silently told the story of what had just happened here. "It seems that there has just been a short but fierce battle here," he thought to himself, noting the presence of the two powerful guards of the Nua monster. At this glance, Drogbal already had a clear understanding of Ethan's strength. After staying in Neltharion's lair for so long, he was well aware of the strength of those draconians, and Ethan's achievements made him feel a little in awe, so he patted his chest heavily and introduced himself. "My name is Igrul. I am the current leader of Drogbar and the chief who should inherit the title of Grey King." "It should be like this?" Ethan found a box nearly 1 meter high among the treasures in the room. He sat on it safely and stared at Drogball in front of him with some amusement. So, what is the reason? What makes you unable to inherit the title of Grey King? It seems that this title means a lot to your Chegbar city. When this issue was mentioned, Igrul's eyes suddenly ignited with anger, and his voice was full of resentment and unwillingness. It's all that devil Neltharion. Since the failure of the last uprising of Drogball, he has completely deprived us of the qualifications of the Grey King as a punishment, trying to make us surrender to his feet forever and not dare to resist at all. Having said this, Igrul clenched his fists tightly, and his veins popped out. He was obviously extremely angry. The Grey King is not only the honorary title of the greatest warrior in our clan, but also the spiritual support of all Drogbar. Since losing this title, my people have gradually lost their will to fight and have begun to indulge in a life of comfort and slavery. After hearing this, Ethan nodded thoughtfully, with a meaningful smile on his lips. So, as the current leader of Drogbar, you are eager to overthrow Neltharion's tyranny and lead your people to regain their former glory and freedom? That's it. Igrul's voice was as firm as iron. This is not only my personal, long-cherished wish, but also the lifelong goal that I and all my kind pursue. Therefore, when my subordinates informed me that someone was looking for Kaz, I came to meet you without hesitation. I want to see with my own eyes whether this warrior who seeks the hammer has enough power to help my people break free from the shackles of slavery. So? Ethan smiled softly, spread his hands, and asked in a teasing tone, "What's your first impression of me? I'm not the big, thick, muscular man you imagined. Are you disappointed by this? You are too humble." Hearing this, Igrul lowered his head more respectfully and replied, "We, the Drogbar, are not a race that judges books by their covers. What's more, you can defeat Neltharion's 2 gatekeepers in such a short period of time. That alone is enough to prove that your strength is extraordinary." Igrul's words suddenly stopped, and his eyes turned to the charred ground burned by the shadow flames. As far as I know, although dragon people can also have the ability to breathe fire, the flames they can produce are far inferior to the real dragon's breath and cannot produce such an effect at all. So, how did this trace come about? When Ethan heard this, a glint of admiration flashed in his eyes, and he nodded slightly. "Your observation skills are indeed keen. This scorch mark was not caused by ordinary means. The attack wasn't led by the Dragon Man, but by a young dragon. It just so happened that he was the son of Sario." "What?" Igrul exclaimed, shocked. He looked around nervously, fearing that the giant dragon might suddenly appear and capture them all in one fell swoop. "You can rest assured," Ethan waved his hand gently to comfort him. "I have temporarily persuaded him to leave. You've been working with the Black Dragons for so long, you must have noticed something. Not only you, Drogball, but many Black Dragons are also afraid of the current Neltharion. In fact, even his son thinks so. Perhaps we can get help from the Black Dragon family in future actions." The awe in Igrul's eyes grew stronger. Neltharion's power was well known, and his descendants must also be extraordinary. Ethan had managed to survive the siege of Neltharion's son and 2 high-level dragon warriors with ease. He not only killed the 2 dragon warriors, but also kept himself intact. The strength of this sudden intruder was obviously far beyond Igrul's expectations. Of course, Igrul didn't know that Nefarion was indeed Neltharion's son, but he was just one of his sons. The strength of the aspect dragon largely came from the authority granted by the Titans, and this power could not be inherited. Therefore, Nefarion's personal strength was actually not as formidable as it seemed. However, these are matters for later. Chapter 765, Xalatath, Blade of the Dark Empire. The Drogbar race is a creation of the Titans. They have been connected with the earth element since the beginning of their design. Their affinity for the earth element is extraordinary, and their temperament mirrors this connection, hardworking, honest, and steady, giving people a deep sense of security. In fact, not only the Drogbar, but also those races that have been immersed in shamanic culture for a long time exhibit similar characteristics, deeply influenced by the elements. Unlike mages who indirectly manipulate elements with the help of arcane energy, and unlike druids who regard elements as part of nature, The shaman profession has a more direct relationship with the elements. They require the most direct contact and communication with the elements. This long-term and in-depth contact causes their emotions to be deeply affected by the elements, each of which has both positive and negative sides. Take the fire element, for example. Beings affected by it usually show enthusiasm and passion. They have the courage to try new things and maintain a positive attitude towards life. However, the fiery nature of the fire element can also make them irritable and prone to destructive tendencies. The wind element, on the other hand, often gives people an ethereal and changeable feeling. Those influenced by it love traveling, are eager to experience different lives, and harbor lofty dreams. However, in the eyes of ordinary people, they may appear a little frivolous, emotionally unstable, and unpredictable. The influence of the water element is entirely different. People affected by it tend to become gentle and kind in character. They adhere to the golden mean and are flexible. However, the softness of water also makes them more fragile and prone to mood swings. Returning to the Drogbar, their deep connection with the earth element gives them a steady and simple nature, shaping their perseverance. However, the stubbornness and vengeance associated with the earth element are also like a double-edged sword, deeply imprinted on their genetic makeup. The meeting between Ygriel and Ethan, although brief, was of great significance. Even as the leader of the Drogbar, Ygriel could not escape the close surveillance of the draconian overseers for long. In this limited time, he revealed a lot of valuable information to Ethan. This warrior, determined to resist Neltharion to the end, brought key information to Ethan. Among the most crucial were the clues about the Hammer of Khazgoroth. The current whereabouts and method of using this legendary artifact became the focus of their conversation. In addition, Egriel shared some dynamics within the Black Dragon Legion. Without Ethan's reminder, Egriel might not have noticed, but after being pointed out by Ethan, Egriel discovered that since Neltharion returned to the dragon's lair, the strange attitudes of the Black Dragons indeed aligned with Ethan's observations. There was a growing fear and disgust towards Neltharion. As Ethan said, not all members of the Black Dragon Legion are loyal to Neltharion. Some members have already questioned and resented Neltharion's tyranny and erratic behavior. They may become important allies of the resistance in the future. According to Ygriel's description, the Hammer of Khazgoroth is indeed hidden deep in Neltharion's lair. However, uncovering the seal of this holy hammer is no easy task. The seal was placed by Titan Guardian Azadas himself, indicating its complexity and power. Ygriel had bravely challenged the trial of this seal several times while Neltharion was away. Unfortunately, he has not been able to successfully defeat the Guardian and lift the seal. The Hammer of Khazgoroth is guarded by hundreds of mass-produced Protoss without self-awareness. They are not ordinary warriors, but formidable men created through special means, each at the level of a high-level professional. Facing such opponents, Ygriel and his men alone are clearly unable to achieve their goals. If the information provided by Egriel is correct, one can imagine how difficult it would be to defeat these guardians of the Holy Hammer and lift the seal. High-level professionals represent the pinnacle that mortals can reach. It can be said that every mass-produced Protoss possesses strength that surpasses the elites of mortal races. They follow established procedures and act independently, with their cooperation reaching an astonishing level of tacit understanding. Such an enemy is undoubtedly the most terrifying. Guardian Azadas clearly has no intention of letting anyone take away the Holy Hammer easily. To prevent anyone from attempting to force a breakthrough through sheer numbers, he set a strict upper limit on the number of challengers. Once the number of challengers exceeds 100, equal to the number of Protoss, the Guardian will not be triggered, and the seal will naturally remain intact. This setting undoubtedly further increases the difficulty of lifting the seal. "Hey, this is really tricky." Ethan smacked his lips helplessly, a trace of worry flashing in his eyes. He looked up in the direction of Neltharion's lair, secretly planning his next move. "However, now that I've come here, I can't leave empty-handed. While Neltharion is still sleeping, I'm going to test it out." He turned around, his eyes falling on the ancient god's scimitar that was still shining with light. He gently raised the corners of his mouth, revealing a sarcastic smile. Zalatath, you must have heard enough of our conversation, right? Don't you want to express some opinions? The flashing light on the Dark Empire's sword suddenly paused briefly, as if it was thinking about how to respond. Ethan keenly captured this change, feeling a dark spiritual force trying to contact his mind. He was well prepared and immediately imposed a mental barrier on himself to prevent any unexpected events. Then, he cautiously approached this consciousness. The next moment, a pleasant and intellectual female voice sounded in Ethan's mind with a tone of surprise. "Young Night Elf, you really surprise me. How on earth do you know my origin? Could it be that you have browsed through Xandu's diary?" Xandu is the most famous of all the previous wielders of Zalatath. This troll comes from the powerful Gurubashi tribe and is an ambitious witch doctor. However, the brutal political struggle caused him to fall from the peak of power and fame, and he was eventually expelled by his opponents. Since then, the flame of revenge had been burning in his heart, and he was always planning his way back to the top. Such people have cracks in their souls and are easily eroded by the ancient gods. Zalatath took a fancy to his ambition and resentment, quietly extending its corrupt tentacles. Under the bewitchment of Zalatath, Xandu performed a forbidden ritual. He did not hesitate to kill his own people, performing a grand blood sacrifice to resurrect the servant of the ancient god, General Kisix. This move was like opening Pandora's box, triggering a tragic war that lasted for centuries. In this war, General Kisix, leading the Akir army, launched a challenge to the Troll Empire during its period of complete victory. Their goal was to unseal all the ancient gods and recreate the Dark Empire that was destroyed by the Titans. However, this war also ended with the victory of the Trolls, and they were finally defeated by the demons during their period of complete victory. But the Trolls paid a heavy price for this victory. The once prosperous Troll Empire began to split and weaken, which gave the Night Elves an opportunity to take advantage of it. The impact of this legendary battle was far-reaching and lasting. At the end of the war, General Kisix was killed, and the Akir also suffered greatly. The unprecedented heavy losses fragmented and gradually evolved into the Nerubians of Azjol Nerub in the north, the Kiraji and Ankiraj in the southwest, and the Mantid in Pandaria in the south. These Zerg tribes caused countless waves in subsequent history, bringing endless trouble to the various races that came to dominate Azeroth after the Trolls. And Zalatath, which started everything, was also lost in the smoke of this war. No one thought that it would appear in Neltharion's treasure house. Ethan chuckled as he walked to the Sword of the Dark Empire and slowly squatted down. With a bit of teasing, he gently poked the weird, large purple eyeball on the handle of the scimitar with his finger, as if teasing a kitten. "I'm really curious. Why do you dare to hide in the treasure house of Neltharion's servants with such a high profile? You know, Neltharion was corrupted by N'Zoth, and among those who once tore your body apart, N'Zoth also has a share of credit. When you stay here, aren't you afraid of being discovered by him?" "You even know this?" Zalatath was shocked when it heard Ethan speak so bluntly. It realized that the rhetoric and inducement methods used to control Xandu in the past might not work in front of this person. In the eyes of Zalatath, it is rare for mortals to know the existence of the ancient gods, and Ethan could be said to be knowledgeable. After all, the history of the Dark Empire is too long and has been washed away by the long river of time. The Titans used their powerful power to erase traces of their existence, making this period of history even more confusing. Therefore, even those archaeologists who have a deep understanding of history only know that there is such a thing as the ancient god. Most people do not know that there are more than just ancient gods. Even if they do know, they just treat all the ancient gods as donkeys of the same camp. However, the man in front of him had an unusually deep understanding of the ancient gods. Not only did he understand their history, but he also knew their factional struggles and internal conflicts well. This deep understanding made Zalatath feel astonished. It began to realize that Ethan was no ordinary person. Does this mean that he had already understood the secrets contained in the Blade of the Dark Empire? Ethan keenly captured Zalatath's surprise, and he was secretly proud of himself. He understood that Xalatath was extremely cunning, and if he wanted to negotiate with the former ancient god, he must show sufficient strength and profound knowledge. Now it seems that his strategy has begun to bear fruit. Before Xalatath spoke, it had to consider whether Ethan already knew her secret. This subtle psychological game made Ethan even more convinced that he had a favorable position in this contest. Chapter 766, Threat Artifact. Where did your information come from? How deeply have you dug into our history? I have no way of knowing, but I have to say, do you have any misunderstandings about the ancient gods? Xalatath's voice carried a hint of dissatisfaction. She sneered unabashedly and continued, First of all, as a weapon that cannot move on its own, I did not come here voluntarily. It was the foolish Black Dragon King who inadvertently brought me here during an expedition. Secondly, why do you think the ancient gods like N'Zoth would be wary of my already mutilated existence? In their eyes, I am no longer a threat. Oh, is that so? I don't believe it. Ethan raised his eyebrows slightly and responded lightly. He was not completely convinced by Xalatath's words. He knew very well that the ancient gods were adept at brainwashing, and their words, blessed by the power of shadow, were often full of inducement and confusion. It could be said that lying was already their instinct. He could detect that there was a lot of bluffing in what she had just said. Since you said that, it shouldn't be a big deal if I reveal your identity in front of Neltharion, Ethan said with a teasing tone. As soon as these words came out, Xalatath immediately fell silent. In her previous words, although the reason for being trapped in the treasure house was true, the part about not being afraid of N'Zoth was mixed with many lies. Although the ancient gods are all subordinates of the Lord of the Void, they have never been friends or colleagues. Each ancient god harbors the ambition to devour the others and become the sole master of Azeroth. Back then, the Titan Guardians were able to defeat the Dark Empire largely due to the conflicts between the four ancient gods. This contradiction caused the Dark Empire to split into four parts, and the four ancient gods fought against each other, thus greatly weakening the Empire's power. Therefore, now that N'Zoth is in a weak state, once there is an opportunity to devour a colleague to strengthen himself, he naturally has no reason to refuse. Therefore, Xalatath's claim that she is not afraid of N'Zoth is just talk. Not being afraid of him does not mean she is willing to see him. That's all, Ethan chuckled, stood up, and lightly dusted himself off. I'm not interested in you much anyway, so just stay here and wait. One day, a dragon-slaying hero will kill Neltharion and find you, or Neltharion will be merciful and take you out. Ethan's retreat hit Xalatath's weakness. Her heart tightened, and she became anxious on the spot. Wait, don't leave yet. Please stay. Xalatath called eagerly. The two suggestions Ethan mentioned were obviously impossible. The so-called dragon-slaying warriors, no matter how powerful, would not dare to face the demigod dragon. As for Neltharion personally sending her out, Xalatath didn't even consider it. But this also meant that she was indeed trapped here, and she did not want to miss this rare opportunity. After finally meeting a warrior who dared to break into Neltharion's treasure house, how could she give up so easily? She longed to see the light of day again, and did not want to be imprisoned in this cold treasure house any longer. If Ethan left, who knew when the next visitor would come? Seeing Ethan turning around to leave without any hesitation, Xalatath hurriedly spoke out to persuade him to stay. Aren't you going to take me away from here? You know, I am a god with 10 pieces of powerful power. Ethan turned back with a deliberately surprised expression on his face. Take you away? Why should I keep a potential threat by my side? A danger like you that could explode at any time. I'd better give it a wide berth. No, dear Ethan. You really misunderstood, Xalatath argued eagerly, her voice almost pleading. Ethan's decisive attitude. Xalatath's heart surged with anxiety. Her tone became more humble, with an unprecedented urgency, fearing that Ethan would reject her decisively. This situation was unimaginable in the past. For the ancient god who is proficient in PUA spells and mind control, she usually has absolute dominance. In the past, Xalatath had always been able to easily understand the hearts of those who tried to negotiate with her. No matter how they hid it or performed, they couldn't escape her eyes. Those so-called ingenious negotiation methods of retreating into advancement were like child's play in front of her and had no effect. However, Ethan was an exception. His mental barrier was like an impenetrable wall, firmly guarding his inner world. This made it impossible for Zolotath to peek into his mind as easily as usual, nor to predict his next move. Unable to see through people's hearts, Zolotath had to lower herself and be led by Ethan like an ordinary mortal. She was eager to reassure Ethan and convince him of her sincerity. "I swear to you," Zolotath's voice was full of pleading, "I will never force you to do anything against your will. Your will shall always be respected by me, and your choices will always be valued." However, Ethan ignored her vow. He snorted coldly, with a sarcastic smile on his face. "These words come from the mouth of an ancient god who is good at deceiving people. There is really no credibility at all. I am very curious, did you also praise that poor man Xandu with the same words?" "That's not the same." Zolotath defended herself eagerly. Xandu's obsession was too deep. I just briefly mentioned that resurrecting a powerful ancient being could help him regain power. Fools who think they are chosen by God are easily convinced. But you are different. I feel that your inner belief is much firmer than his. The mental barrier you possess cannot be penetrated by ordinary charm spells. Although Zolotath's words were full of temptation, Ethan was not swayed by them. However, from a certain perspective, Zolotath's words did give him some kind of reminder. Psychic barrier? Ethan thought to himself. With my current spiritual cultivation and understanding, Zolotath's bewitchment has no effect on me at all. What's more, I know her details well, and she knows everything about her. How could she deceive me without knowing anything about my identity as a time traveler? At this time, his thoughts turned to a certain special item in his space bag. If it really gets out of control, he thought to himself, can I just destroy it completely? Ethan rubbed his chin and fell into brief thought. Under Zolotath's barrage of persuasion, he slowly walked back to the scimitar. Yes, that's it. As long as you rescue me from this remote and desolate place, I will definitely... Wait, what is this? Halfway through, Zolotath's chatter stopped abruptly, and her eyes were firmly attracted by an emerald green rune in Ethan's hand. Although the rune was small, it exuded an aura that could not be ignored. Zolotath could feel the powerful magical power contained in it, as if once triggered, it would cause immeasurable harm to her and might even completely destroy her. How is this possible? Zolotath's voice trembled with shock, and her screams echoed in Ethan's mind. What spell have you mastered? What kind of power is sealed in this rune? This is just the Great Disintegration technique. Why are you making such a fuss? Ethan was given a headache by her reaction. Ethan's scream echoed through the dungeon. He pressed his forehead, a hint of impatience in his voice. If you say another word, I will use it against you unceremoniously. Zolotath heard the seriousness in his tone and closed her mouth involuntarily. Initially, to open the heavy iron door of Aseline's dungeon, Ethan carefully crafted the Great Disintegration rune. Opening the dungeon consumed only one rune, but that didn't mean he had created just one. He still had a significant inventory on hand. Since his mage level had not yet reached level 19, he couldn't directly use 9-level spells like Great Disintegration. He could only create runes to create opportunities to use such high-level spells. These runes were now his trump card, waiting to play a role at critical moments. The precious materials for making these runes were generously provided by the Sun Chasers. Ethan naturally wouldn't miss such a good opportunity. Dathrema didn't know what the Great Disintegration technique was anyway, so Ethan took the opportunity to gather more materials in case he needed them. As for why Zolotath was afraid, the reason was simple. The Great Disintegration technique is also known as the Great Bankruptcy technique. When this spell is activated, all magic and magical items in the area become vulnerable, except those carried by the caster or in close contact. Whether it is rare items that are permanently enchanted or magical effects exerted on creatures, they will all be dismantled by the power of this spell. Disintegration means that the spell is broken down into its most primitive components and completely destroyed as if by a powerful force. Whether it is a permanently enchanted magic item or a magic effect cast on a creature, it will be affected. The magic effect will be dispelled, and the magic item will be forcibly restored to a normal item. Therefore, when the Great Disintegration technique is cast, various potions, scrolls, rings, scepters, and many strange objects, artifacts, and holy objects carried by the victim, as well as various weapons and armor, can instantly lose the magical power they contain. This is undoubtedly a devastating blow to most professionals who wear all their wealth on their bodies, almost equivalent to financial bankruptcy. Even powerful artifacts and holy objects cannot be completely spared from the threat of the Great Disintegration technique. Although artifacts have higher resistance than ordinary magic items and the probability of being destroyed is greatly reduced, they are still not completely immune to the Great Disintegration, and there is still the possibility of being destroyed. But this is already very rare. You must know that in most cases, unless the gods personally take action, the artifact is equivalent to an indestructible object. This makes Great Disintegration one of the very few spells that can threaten artifacts and one of the only methods that can completely destroy them. It's no wonder that Xal'atath is in deep fear and uneasiness at this moment. She recalls the time when she was shaped as the blade of the Dark Empire, her essence imprisoned in that cold weapon. Although she lost her freedom, it also gave her an almost immortal quality. At least she lived for so many years, beguiling countless creatures with her sweet words, leading them to destruction and committing countless evil deeds. Even if she was occasionally discovered by the victim, the worst result would be to be sealed. She had never truly experienced the fear of being completely destroyed. If the artifact were really so fragile, then those people who had been harmed by her blade of the Dark Empire would have probably destroyed her in their endless anger. How could she have had the chance to exist to this day? Because of this, she was so unscrupulous and fearless in the beginning. But now, for the first time, she truly felt that there was a real existence in this world that could threaten her life. The Great Disintegration technique in Ethan's hands was a terrifying reality she could not ignore. Ethan's hand made her feel a sharp pain in her chest. An unprecedented panic surged through her. Even though she hadn't witnessed it with her own eyes, her instincts screamed that once this spell was cast, the immortal body she relied on might vanish. Faced with this powerful threat, she acted. Chapter 767, Neltharion appears, you. Xal'atath's words suddenly became cautious, her sharp tone softening considerably. You actually have the ability to destroy artifacts. How on earth do you do it? Ethan smiled proudly and gently shook the green rune in his hand. This is just simple magic, he said provocatively. Have you never seen this magic before? No, Xal'atath responded hesitantly, a hint of trembling in her voice. Then your eyes have been opened now, Ethan said coldly. So, listen to me. From now on, you have to be careful with what you say. As long as I feel that you're trying to confuse me or harm me, I will use Great Disintegration on you. Although this magic is not 100% guaranteed to destroy the artifact, it doesn't matter. Guess what? I can try it a few more times. How many times will it take for it to be shattered to pieces by the attack of sky-splitting technique? Xal'atath was already panicking at this moment. No, I don't dare. Please believe me, I will never try to hurt you. Her heart was full of regret, and she couldn't help but start to reflect on what had happened to her in the first place, leading her to fall into the hands of this evil star. Faced with Ethan's aggressive attitude, she even began to doubt who was the ancient god and who was the true master. However, Xal'atath's submission did not satisfy Ethan. He frowned slightly and said displeasedly, "Don't always say you. It makes you look very uneducated. Since you are now my sword, what do you think you should call me?" Xal'atath hesitated for a moment and tentatively replied, "Master?" Facing the threat to her survival, Xal'atath, who was once an ancient god, looked extremely soft at this moment, and she blurted out the flattering title. Ethan nodded. "That's more like it." As he spoke, he put the scimitar on his belt and planned to challenge the seal of the Hammer of Khazgoros. "Master," Xal'atath suddenly said. "What's wrong?" Ethan looked a little impatient. Xal'atath said cautiously, "If you plan to get the Hammer of Khazgoroth to fight Neltharion or the Burning Legion, I suggest you give up this plan for the time being." Ethan, who was about to change his form, suddenly stopped. "Why?" he asked doubtfully. Although Ethan had some knowledge of the history of Warcraft, his understanding was only at the level of a spectator. As a survivor of Azeroth from the Dark Empire, Xal'atath, as a witness, had a deeper understanding of the world and the Titans, the enemies of the ancient gods, than he did. Each of the pillars of creation left behind by the Titans contains unparalleled power. However, it is extremely difficult for ordinary mortals to control them freely. Xal'atath explained cautiously. I once witnessed the end of a troll priest who accidentally obtained the Tidestone of Golganath by Xandu's side. She was already a high-level professional at the beginning, and she could reach legend if she took one step further. This kind of strength is already outstanding among mortals and can be called the elite among the elite. However, when she faced the newly awakened Kisix, she had no choice but to activate the Tidestone and only launched one attack. She couldn't bear the powerful force, causing her body to bleed, and she died on the spot. Having said this, Xal'atath paused and said more carefully, I am not underestimating your ability, Master. It's just that the power of Titan's artifact is too powerful, and the energy consumed by mortals when used is beyond imagination. When one's own energy is exhausted, the artifact will begin to absorb the user's life force as a price. Therefore, if you hope to use the Pillar of Creation to turn things around, I suggest you think twice. After listening to Xal'atath's words, Ethan frowned. He had thought that using the Pillar of Creation would be very expensive, but he didn't expect that the cost of manipulating the Pillar of Creation would be so heavy. However, if you think about it carefully, this aligns with the common sense of the world. Everything has a price, and there are gains and losses. The power of the Pillars of Creation is indeed unparalleled, surpassing all artifacts, but activating its potential inevitably comes with huge energy consumption. This heavy burden is obviously unbearable for ordinary people. Ethan thought for a moment and murmured to himself, no wonder in the original work, Huan Gaoling's story ended abruptly after expelling Deathwing, and there was no news about him after that. It's not that he didn't want to continue writing legends. It's just that his body couldn't bear the burden of using the Holy Hammer, so he didn't collapse after all. After some weighing and hesitation, Ethan finally decided to give up the plan to take away the Hammer of Khazgoroth for the time being. He sighed and said with relief, That's all. If we really come to a critical moment of life and death, we don't have only this Pillar of Creation to rely on. Let the Holy Hammer stay here for the time being. After saying that, he turned to look at Neltharion's treasure pile, a glimmer of satisfaction flashing in his eyes. He smiled and added, At least with these treasures, this adventure will be worthwhile. Although Ethan is quite familiar with the history of World of Warcraft, he is not a professional archaeologist. After all, there is a gap between the game and reality, and it is impossible to show the details of all items in the game. Therefore, facing the pile of remaining treasures and miscellaneous items, he was unable to identify their true value and function. Time was tight, and he did not have enough time to study and identify them carefully. So, he decided to pack up all these treasures and throw them all into his own space package, planning to slowly sort and count them after the war was over. Then, Ethan set out on his way back, walking slowly along the path he came. On the way back to Maiev, Xal'atath, who had been alone in the treasure pile for thousands of years, finally broke her long silence. Although she had been warned and threatened by Ethan before, she still couldn't bear the loneliness and started talking to him. Master, do you really believe that the young black dragon will resist his powerful father? Ao has become extremely cruel. He will ruthlessly use cruel methods against anyone who dares to challenge his will, even his own blood relatives. Does that Nefarian really dare to resist? How is that possible? Ethan couldn't help but chuckle when he heard this. That little guy is just a slippery man. He thought he could deceive me with his little tricks. In fact, I know very well that he is just pretending to be weak, just trying to get away with it. As he spoke, he shook his head slightly, with a cunning light flashing in his eyes. Actually, I had no intention of taking his life, and I didn't expect my previous words to be effective in a short time. I just wanted to help Nypha. In Leon's heart, a seed that has not yet germinated was quietly sown. As the ancient gods, you should be well versed in the subtle way of induction, right? A strange smile appeared on Ethan's face, and he continued. Although this seems to be just a trivial move, once Nefarian is cornered, ha! Then there will be a wonderful drama. Xal'atath herself is also a troublemaker. Otherwise, it would be impossible to imagine that she had ignited the war in the Troll Empire with just a small move and a like. The downhill road also caused the insect race to be torn apart and severely weakened, completely dispelling the ancient gods' plan to expect the insects to develop obscenely underground and then push back to the surface to recreate the Dark Empire period. You know, after the war started, nothing happened to her. After all, the insect men are all subordinates of the four ancient gods. What does it have to do with her, the fifth ancient god who was devoured and sealed by four of her colleagues? How could she? Ethan's involvement? Please give me flowers 0. She only needed to light the fire gently, and she didn't care what kind of fire the fire would bloom into or what kind of earth-shattering explosion it would cause. In fact, the bigger the chaos, the more excited she felt. This may be due to her current situation. Trapped in the blade of the Dark Empire, she couldn't escape, nor could she regain her former strength. Without a master to carry her, she couldn't even move, but she couldn't die even if she wanted to. In this embarrassing state, she had no other way to pass the time except to play some pranks and have some fun. It's the same now. At this moment, Xal'atath heard Ethan's profound words and was immediately intrigued. Interesting, she chuckled. You are so cunning, huh? Ethan raised his eyebrows slightly, gesturing for her to continue. I made a mistake. Xal'atath would certainly not be bored in the days to come 0. During this in-depth conversation, they quickly returned to Maiev. Why did you come back so soon? Maiev looked at Ethan in front of her, and her eyes inadvertently fell on the blade of Xal'atath Dark Empire on his waist. A trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. You said that the hammer of Khazgoroth is a scimitar? She looked at Ethan carefully. From his head to his feet, it seemed that only this scimitar exuded a mysterious aura and looked like an artifact. Other than that, Ethan's attire was the same as when he left before, and she couldn't imagine anything else that might use the legendary hammer of Khazgoroth. No, you misunderstood. Ethan shook his head and explained, This is not the hammer of Khazgoroth, but a trophy, a scimitar that can help me cast spells. Ethan denied Maiev's speculation, but did not reveal Xal'atath's secrets. Instead, he explained to her the fatal dangers associated with manipulating the hammer of Khazgoroth. So, your attempt was not successful. We will still have to follow Malfurion's strategy after all, right? Maiev calmly concluded after listening to Ethan's account. Ethan nodded helplessly, with a wry smile on his lips. Now it seems that our choices are indeed limited. After some twists and turns, their plan seemed to have returned to its original point, stealing the dragon's soul. Just when Maiev wanted to discuss it further, Ethan suddenly stepped forward and hugged her tightly. Then the two of them worked together to paint 10 huge pieces of cloth shop. Shh, Maiev, don't make a sound. There was a hint of nervousness in Ethan's tone. There's something moving. Maiev immediately held her breath and allowed this slightly ambiguous and awkward posture to continue. She lightly sniffed the man's breath in front of her, her cheeks turning slightly red. She had grown up, but she had never been so close to the opposite sex. This was the first time, which made her very uncomfortable. 01354128, Felu 191521-031. It didn't take long for her attention to be diverted. A dull sound came from the depths of the cave, as if it was the impact of some heavy object on the ground, or some giant thing moving slowly. Then they were surprised to see a huge black dragon slowly walking out of the passage of another cave. Its body appeared even larger and more majestic in the dim cave, and every step was accompanied by the trembling of the ground. Ethan couldn't be more familiar with the creature in front of him. It was Neltharion Thur, whom he had fought against. Chapter 768, The Hidden Dragon Soul. Ethan was a little worried that Neltharion would notice the faint aura on his body. Fortunately, the smell of hot steel all around provided him with a layer of natural cover. In the face of this terrifying aura, not only did the two infiltrators, Ethan and Maiev, feel palpitations, But the goblins working in the cave were even more frightened, especially those goblins who were trying to be lazy. Their legs were shaking like chaff, and their hands were covering their faces, as if they could avoid Neltharion's terrible wrath. Ethan cautiously stuck his head out and stared at the dragon in the distance. The ferocious figure was the same as what he had seen that night, a twisted and deformed body, and his eyes were more terrifying than ever before. What's even more shocking was that Neltharion's body, covered with hard scales, was riddled with gaping wounds, with fire and lava constantly spurting out from these shaking wounds. Some wounds even had tongues of fire flying wildly, as if to indicate that Neltharion's body would one day completely collapse and fall apart. However, when Ethan's eyes fell on the object tightly held by the dragon's huge claws, his thoughts about the black dragon's imminent split instantly disappeared. It was a golden disc, shining with a dazzling light in the dark claws of the dragon. It was the soul of the dragon. For a moment, Ethan felt a strong impulse in his heart. He wanted to transform into a phoenix and rush towards the dragon to snatch the golden artifact from those giant claws. But this thought was fleeting, and he also understood that this was not just an unattainable fantasy, but a path of no return to destruction. He could only suppress his inner desire and choose to wait and see quietly, waiting for the opportunity. At this moment, the goblins inadvertently provided them with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. "Don't be lazy. Don't have any evil thoughts, you humble reptiles." Neltharion let out a deafening roar again. His huge tail hit the ground hard, and a loud bang echoed in the cave, scaring several goblins out of their wits. Ethan was surprised to find that the cruel Neltharion did not choose to execute a few goblins to scare the others this time, but only issued a stern warning. It seemed that his physical condition was indeed urgent, so much so that he was unwilling to waste extra labor on hand. The goblin foreman nodded hurriedly, the panic on his face gradually receding, replaced by a professional calmness. "Yes, Lord Neltharion, my master," he asked humbly. "What are your orders?" The black dragon's voice rolled in like thunder. "I feel that my body is being torn apart. The power of the dragon soul has exceeded my endurance limit. Mekluo, when will the armor you built for me be finished? This requires precise calculations, careful measurements, and comprehensive consideration of all your needs, my master." The goblin foreman Mekluo looked embarrassed, but still responded calmly. "We must act cautiously, and not be in a hurry to avoid making a work that dissatisfies you." Neltharion's nose suddenly came closer, almost knocking the goblin foreman to the ground. He roared, "I hope it's done right away. Better to put it on now." The goblin foreman stepped back repeatedly, while comforting. Of course, I will do it as soon as possible, my master." He stood firm until he could meet Neltharion's fiery eyes, and then continued, "Please allow me to check on the latest progress on the armor." He glanced cautiously at Neltharion's clasped claws, the disc shining brightly in them. The goblin foreman mustered up the courage to speak bluntly. "Master, please allow me to speak frankly. I have warned you that the power emanating from the disc will intensify your pain. Before we put on your new armor, you should probably consider placing it in a safe place temporarily." Hearing this, Neltharion seemed to have been poked at a sensitive point. His eyes flashed with angry fire, and he flatly refused. "Impossible. I will never let this disc leave my side." "Mekluo, you will not move me even half a step." But Mekluo stood firm, insisting, "Master, if you don't put down the disc temporarily, I can't guarantee you'll last until the new armor is completed. If you fall, anyone can easily take the disc from your ashes." These blunt words finally reached the black dragon. Neltharion let out several violent roars, struggling and resisting, but ultimately he reluctantly acknowledged the goblin's point. He bellowed, "What you said makes some sense, Mekluo, but you must finish my armor as soon as possible. If not, I'll hand you over to my children as snacks." Mekluo nodded hurriedly, responding, "Master, please rest assured, we will go all out to complete your armor as soon as possible." The black dragon let out a rumbling roar, turned clumsily, and slowly walked into the passage on the other side. Seeing this, Ethan's tense body finally relaxed. He whispered to Maiev, "Did you hear that? The black dragon is going to hide the disc. This is our chance. The dragon soul will soon be out of Neltharion's hands." Maiev nodded silently. Then let's follow quickly and seize this opportunity to take the dragon soul. Ethan and Maiev carefully avoided the sight of several goblins and quietly slipped into the dark passage. To ensure they wouldn't be noticed, Ethan kept a certain distance from the black dragon, relying on his keen perception to track its whereabouts. During their pursuit, the closest they got was seeing the huge shadow of the black dragon. Even without visual contact, Ethan was confident they hadn't lost their target. As the black dragon navigated the maze-like tunnels, the long pursuit made Maiev impatient. Suddenly, the dragon's footsteps stopped abruptly. Maiev and Ethan instinctively halted, quickly hiding deep in the stone wall, waiting with bated breath. After a period of silence, they cautiously poked their heads out to observe the situation ahead. Seeing nothing unusual, Ethan immediately chased after the black dragon, trying to close the distance. Just as they were about to approach their target, the Earth Guardian turned into a narrow cave. The cave was just wide enough to accommodate Neltharion's massive body, causing slight friction sounds as he moved forward. "This is it," Neltharion murmured to himself. "You will be safe and sound here." He cautiously stretched out his hand and gently touched a stone slightly protruding from the cave wall. The stone flashed a soft light under his touch and slowly moved away, revealing a hidden passage. It was clearly dug manually, perhaps by the black dragon himself. The Earth Guardian glanced at the dragon's soul in his hand, a trace of hesitation in his eyes. He took a deep breath, made up his mind, and gently placed the golden disc in the hole. After everything was arranged, he carefully restored the hidden rock to its original position. As another ray of light flashed, everything returned to its previous state, as if nothing had happened. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Ethan would never have imagined that an ordinary stone could hide such a sophisticated mechanism. The perfectly camouflaged stone blended seamlessly with the surrounding environment, making it difficult to detect. What surprised Ethan was that he couldn't sense the disc's presence at all now. The black dragon hadn't hidden the disc outside the material plane, which meant he must have found an extraordinary way to conceal it. Neltharion stood there without moving for a long time, his eyes fixed on the hidden stone. Ethan's eyes remained fixed on the place where the dragon soul was stored. His claws slowly rose again, and the sharp tips were only a few inches away from the stone. However, the black dragon finally let out a frustrated roar, clearly battling his own desires. Reluctantly, he put down his paws, slowly turned around, and left the hidden cave. During this time, Ethan and the others could only wait patiently for Neltharion to leave. Since Neltharion was truly reluctant to part with the dragon soul, the black dragon hesitated and spent several long minutes before finally departing. For Ethan and the others, these minutes felt like an eternity. After confirming that the black dragon had gone, Ethan and Maiev exchanged relieved smiles. They looked around to ensure no one else was in the cave, then cautiously approached the hiding place of the dragon soul. As Ethan neared the mysterious stone, he felt an indescribable discomfort, as if something was spying on him from the darkness, making him shudder. In contrast, Maiev felt nothing. However, she also sensed that things seemed to be going too smoothly, and this calmness made her uneasy. "Hurry up, we have to take it and leave immediately," Maiev urged. Ethan hesitated to take action. He finally stretched out his hand but stopped midair. An instinctive warning filled him with hesitation and struggle. At that moment, Zolotat's voice suddenly echoed in Ethan's mind. "Master, don't touch it!" "What's going on?" Ethan was shocked and asked hurriedly, "Why are you stopping me from touching it?" Recalling the chill he felt when he was close to the dragon soul, he added, "Is there really a trap that I can't see?" "That's right." Zolotat's voice was full of seriousness. "You should also be able to feel that power, right? That is a trap set by the ancient gods. Anyone who touches the dragon soul will be affected. I can't predict how you'll be affected, but it's definitely not going to be a good thing." Zolotat's words were like the final straw, dispelling Ethan's intention of taking the dragon soul. He retracted his hand, feeling a deep sense of terror. Chapter 769, Meeting with Teammates. "What's wrong? Why don't you take the dragon soul?" Maiev asked, puzzled, as she prepared to reach out and touch the mechanism covering the secret room. However, Ethan quickly grabbed her hand, stopping her movement. Maev looked at Ethan in confusion and saw him shaking his head slightly, saying solemnly, "There is something wrong with this dragon soul. We should not act rashly. Let's leave here first." In terms of perception and spellcasting, Maev had no doubts about Ethan's abilities. After all, Ethan did have stronger perception and spellcasting abilities than she did. Although she herself didn't notice anything strange, since Ethan said so, he must have a point. So, she followed Ethan out obediently, her curiosity and doubts not diminishing at all. Little did she know that Ethan's decision was actually temporary. He himself was full of questions and kept asking Zolotath. "So why are you telling me this?" Ethan asked curiously. "Wouldn't it be better for you to let me be confused by N'Zoth?" "Huh. No way," Zolotath replied resolutely. "I will not let you be captured by other ancient gods. You are my master, Ethan. How could I just sit back and ignore you?" Ethan knew in his heart that Zolotath was unwilling to fall into the hands of his old rival, N'Zoth. He nodded slightly. Although this ancient sword appeared to be respectful to her, the inherent arrogance still flowed in her blood. So he asked calmly, "Then what should we do? Isn't there a way to deal with this trap?" "That's not the case, Master." Zolotath pondered for a moment and then replied, "Actually, if you just want to solve the problem of the dragon soul, the method is very simple. Didn't you use that great disintegration technique to deal with me? The same method can be used to deal with the dragon soul." She further suggested, "Since your spell has the power to destroy me, it will also be destructive to the dragon soul. In this way, Neltharion will lose his threat regardless of N'Zoth's role in the dragon soul. Whatever traps are set, they will all be reduced to nothingness in the face of the power of the great disintegration technique." Ethan heard another meaning in Zolotath's words. He smiled faintly and said, "This will also consume my precious magic materials and make you feel safer, right?" Zolotath could only fall into awkward silence as Ethan saw through her thoughts. Ethan smiled tolerantly. "Because you reminded me in time, I won't care about your little calculation. However, destroying the dragon soul is not my choice. So can you change your plan? Is there a way to solve the trap without harming the dragon soul itself?" In fact, even if Zolotath didn't have a little bit of caution, Ethan would never adopt her suggestion. If the dragon soul is destroyed, what can he do to destroy the portal on the Well of Eternity, thus stopping the influx of demons once and for all? Okay, Zolotath sighed helplessly, seeing that her proposal was rejected. "Since you, Master, are determined to win the dragon soul, it's not that I can't understand it. It's just that we have to make complete preparations in advance. I can teach you a spell which is specially designed to deal with the dangerous traps set by the ancient gods. However, the steps to cast this spell are quite complicated." Cumbersomeness is not a problem. Ethan was very satisfied with her answer. "I have plenty of time and patience. Now, let's leave this cave first, and then prepare this spell." So Ethan took Maev and carefully left the cave, preparing to find a safe place far enough away from the black dragon's lair to start preparing the spell. Ethan didn't want to alarm Neltharion because of a little negligence. After all, their actions at the moment were related to the safety of the entire world. However, just as they were about to step out of the cave and greet the starry night outside, an unexpected face suddenly appeared in their sight. "Crassus?" Maev called out the other person's name in surprise. Her tone was full of doubt and surprise. "Crassus, I remember you. You were with that Ronin. Why are you here? Where is Malfurion?" Crassus, one of several time travelers and a red dragon trapped in human form, responded. Due to the laws of this world, he could not revert to his true dragon form, as his past self already existed here. "Malfurion is by my side. We are safe," Crassus said softly, with a slight smile. "But what I didn't expect was that Cenarius would choose you to assist us. This is truly beyond my expectations." "Actually, I was the only one invited here," Maev explained carefully, glancing at Ethan beside her. "He decided to join later, and came here on an impromptu basis to lend a helping hand." After hearing this, Crassus turned to Ethan, his eyes flashing with surprise. "Oh, I understand," he nodded with emotion. "Thank you both from the bottom of my heart for taking such a huge risk to support us." Ethan's attitude was much harsher than Maev's. Ignoring Cross's gratitude, he said sternly, "We need a clear explanation. Are we assisting you, or are you assisting us? From the beginning of the mission until now, we have hardly seen you, yet we have already penetrated a place that is only one step away from the Dragon Soul. I have to wonder what is going on. Who is carrying out this mission? Are Maiev and I taking the spotlight?" Ethan's sharp sarcasm instantly froze the air, making the already tense atmosphere even more oppressive. Perhaps realizing the danger of their location in Neltharion's lair, Crassus quickly adjusted his emotions and said apologetically, "I'm really sorry. We have been watching from a distance and did not take immediate action. But please understand, it wasn't that we didn't want to go in, but the Black Dragon was too alert. If I entered his territory rashly, I might be noticed immediately. Because of this, I couldn't let Malfurion take the risk alone. Fortunately, you didn't rush to get the Dragon Soul," Crassus continued, now with a hint of relief. "Malfurion also noticed the abnormality of the Dragon Soul, but couldn't come to remind you personally. The dragon aura in my body is too obvious, so I dared not step into the cave easily. I'm really lucky that you didn't act rashly." "Hey, you actually said that." Maiev couldn't help but feel curious. "Just now, Ethan mysteriously prevented me from touching the rock behind me. Can you tell us now why he stopped me? Is there something in it? A trap?" "Things are not as simple as you think," Crassus said, his expression becoming serious. "Malfurion entered the Emerald Dream and saw your actions in the dream. But more importantly, he discovered deeper secrets hidden in this secret room, existences full of evil power." Maev's eyes immediately shone with curiosity, and she couldn't wait to ask, "Tell me, what kind of evil thing is that?" "It's a long story. Let's talk about it later. In short, if you touch that mechanism rashly, it will not only alert those evil beings, but also possibly anger Deathwing himself. Fortunately, you were cautious enough and did not act rashly." He motioned for them to move forward. "Now, please follow me. We need to find Malfurion as soon as possible and discuss a careful plan to ensure we can safely get the Dragon Soul." Ethan and Maiev looked at each other and temporarily agreed with Crassus's plan. They turned around, left Neltharion's cave, and followed in Crassus' footsteps, embarking on a journey to find Malfurion. Under Crassus's leadership, they passed through a dense forest and climbed, over rugged mountains. They finally arrived at a hidden mountain pass. Ethan couldn't help but admire Crassus's caution and wisdom. To avoid detection by the Black Dragon, Crassus had found such a concealed place, which indeed provided them with an indescribable sense of security. Here, they finally met Malfurion. As soon as Maiev saw Malfurion, she couldn't wait to ask, "Can you explain to me now what will happen if I touch that stone?" However, Malfurion stared at her silently and did not answer immediately. At this moment, Rhasis took over the conversation. In the final analysis, the crisis facing Azeroth is far more than just the Burning Legion. Demons are only enemies on the surface. Greater threats are actually always lurking behind us. He paused and continued. "You all know about Neltharion, but you may not know why he became like this. Deep underground in this world, there is an extremely evil dark power hidden. Its whispers can drive dragons into madness, more powerful than Neltharion himself." Hearing this, Maiev couldn't help but glance at Ethan, who deliberately showed an expression of sudden realization. Chapter 770, Pre-War Meeting. Ethan knew more secrets about this world than he could reveal to Maiev. The source of some of his intelligence was difficult to explain. These secrets could only be disclosed by true time travelers, like Crassus. "So what is the name of this so-called evil power hidden underground?" Maiev continued to ask. "It is called the Old God." Crassus's tone was filled with awe and heaviness as he mentioned the name. Maiev couldn't help but snort in disdain. As a devout priestess of the moon god, she firmly believed that there was only one god in the world, Elune, whom she served. In her opinion, other so-called gods were false and unworthy of being compared to Elune. Although they are not as great as Elune, their power is indeed extraordinary, Crassus explained. They always lure many cultists to believe in them, so we call them the old gods. Ethan noticed that Xalatath, the artifact on his waist, snorted coldly at Crassus's evaluation. "I seem to have heard this name somewhere before." Ethan pretended to be in deep thought. You mean the mastermind behind all this is actually the old gods? In fact, Ronan and I went back 10,000 years to investigate the matter of Nosdormu, the Lord of Time. I received a message for help from him, which made us suspect that there was a bigger conspiracy behind all this, Crassus continued. I strongly suspect that it was the old gods who secretly manipulated Neltharion's fall, and it was their existence that forced Nosdormu to send us back to this era. Before I came, Lord Cenarius told me that if I wanted to destroy the portal built by Ashara, I had to use a powerful treasure, and the dragon soul obviously met this condition, Maiev said, crossing her arms in dissatisfaction and looking at Crassus. She still couldn't understand why the old gods couldn't take away the dragon soul. Since you are so concerned about the Lord of Time, why do you interfere in our war with the Burning Legion? Maiev's voice rose a few degrees, and she seemed a little excited. Do you think the Red Dragon clan will sit idly by and watch this war? Crassus frowned. Isn't that the case? Maiev's voice was filled with disdain. We have fought against the Burning Legion many times. You red dragons only appeared briefly in the second defense of Black Rook Fortress. When have you ever fought side by side with us? Her words revealed a bit of disdain and disappointment. She wanted to save some face for Crassus, but the memory of the night elves who died because of the rash behavior of the Red Dragon clan made it hard for her to hide her inner dissatisfaction. In fact, her accusations were considered light. She did not directly point out that the so-called support actually only had one red dragon, and the other dragons just made a big fuss on the battlefield and then left. The internal fighting of the Dragon Clan even affected the rebels, leaving behind countless corpses of night elves. Seeing the conversation between Maiev and Crassus gradually heat up, Malfurion grew nervous. He feared that these two important partners would fight due to misunderstandings, which would have a serious impact on their mission. While we are all here for the same goal, there is no need to start an internal conflict. Archdruid Malfurion immediately stepped forward to diffuse the tense atmosphere. Our goal is the dragon soul. Let's work together and not be distracted by these trivial matters. He then turned to Crassus and changed the subject in a calm tone. You told me before that you and Neltharion are both dragons, so he is most likely aware of your presence. He must have anticipated that other dragons might try to steal the demon soul, so he must have made all preparations. Crassus nodded and replied, Indeed, we dragons are extremely sensitive to the power of the dragon soul, but because of this, we are more likely to keep a distance, to avoid alerting the enemy. Moreover, I have always been very careful and try not to expose myself to Neltharion's perception range, Ethan said. Malf, Urian nodded in agreement. You are right. As long as the disc is still in Neltharion's hands, you dragons will always be at risk. I believe many dragons want to try to take it back. The Earth Guardian will naturally think so. He must be wary of dragon magic in the cave, especially your detection magic. Therefore, we need to make plans more carefully. But he is a guardian dragon after all, Crassus said slowly, frowning deeply. Malfurion expected him to elaborate on why his idea was flawed, but instead, the red dragon mage just sighed and nodded seriously. You are right. We will indeed consider trying to steal the dragon soul, and Neltharion will definitely anticipate that we have such an idea. I know him too well. We have fought together before, shared intimacy. Maybe I was so eager to get that thing that I ignored it. I was quite lucky to get here smoothly. However, I am sure that a dragnet has been set in his lair, waiting for other dragons to fall into the trap. That's what I think, Malfurion said, turning to Maiev and advising earnestly. Look, no matter how much strength the Dragon Clan contributed in the war, they, like us, never want the dragon soul to fall into Neltharion's hands. At this point, our interests are consistent, so we can completely trust Mr. Crassus in dealing with the Dragon Clan. It is our precious wealth. After thinking everything through, Crassus finally let go of his dragon's arrogance and began to explain patiently. Maiev, you must not underestimate the ancient gods. Although their power may not be comparable to the moon god Elun you worship, their strength is definitely not comparable to that of the wild demigods. If Neltharion's fall is indeed related to the ancient gods, then the power trying to protect the dragon soul is definitely not just Neltharion. I strongly suspect that the ancient gods may have laid an unimaginable trap in it. Zolototh's eyes gleamed as she keenly captured the key information in Crassus's words, which coincided with some of her thoughts. But she was more concerned about another detail. So, she asked in Ethan's mind with some surprise, this Crassus was really sent from the future to the present by Nosdormu? No wonder he knows these things well. It was only now that she truly began to believe in the existence of time travelers, and was amazed by this wonderful phenomenon of traveling through time and space. Then, her curiosity turned to Ethan. I just discovered that, Master, you seem to know more details than these people from the future, but you have always been tight-lipped and unwilling to share with others. This makes me wonder, could it be that, Master, you are also from the future? Ethan smiled mysteriously and did not answer directly. Instead, he asked, what do you think? There was a reason why Ethan maintained such a non-committal answer. He was a cautious person, and he knew very well that maintaining a certain sense of mystery was crucial when dealing with shrewd individuals like Zolototh. Only in this way could she not fully pry into his inner world and discover his bottom line. Until she understood everything, she had to remain cautious and reverent. After dealing with Zolototh, Ethan turned his attention to Crassus and Malfurion. He smiled slightly and took the initiative to say, I happen to have some unique insights about the traps that the ancient gods may have set. As soon as these words came out, both Malfurion and Crassus showed strong interest. They never expected that this druid, who usually seemed a bit maverick, could bring them unexpected revelations at such a critical moment. Ethan paused. He continued, I discovered this method accidentally in Neltharion's treasure house while deeply exploring his lair. I think it may be of use to us. Of course, he never mentioned Zolototh's existence. Although we have some clues, it is not easy to steal the disc, Crassus said, his tone softening. He turned to Ethan and Maeve, approval evident in his eyes. However, I must say, your courage and wisdom are indeed admirable. It is no small feat to explore Neltharion's lair for so long, not only finding the secret room hiding the dragon soul, but also discovering the spell to open it. It's just that the spell took some time to prepare, so I had to leave the cave at that time. Ethan shrugged lightly, a hint of helplessness in his voice. Although I found the location of the secret room, if I can't enter, then all the effort will be in vain. The cave is fraught with dangers, especially the large number of goblins, which are much more difficult to deal with than we anticipated. If we want to successfully obtain the dragon soul, we must work closely to face these challenges. Chapter 771, Preparation to Break the Seal. In a harmonious and positive discussion atmosphere, several people quickly formulated a careful plan. However, they also clearly realized that this operation was still fraught with dangers. After some deliberation, they finally decided. Ethan and Maiev would be the vanguard, responsible for leading the way and exploring. Malfurion would enter the cave with them to help retrieve the dragon soul, and Crassus would stay outside to watch, ensuring a safe retreat route for them. Immediately afterwards, Ethan began to follow the methods instructed by Zolototh and started making magic items that could temporarily block the power of the ancient god. Following Zolototh's prompts, Ethan took out a crystal and slowly injected spiritual power into it, while Zolototh also assisted. As time went by, 10 crystals shining with a dark light gradually took shape in his hands. These were the shadow crystals. The shadow crystal can be regarded as the physical manifestation of shadow, one of the 6 major forces in the world of Azeroth. In the universe where Azeroth is located, there are 6 kinds of forces, and these forces accompany each other in pairs, forming 3 pairs of opposite yet unified existences, which together maintain the balance and harmony of Azeroth. The first is the confrontation between arcane magic and fel energy. Arcane magic is the power of order in Azeroth, representing stability, rules, and wisdom. Its representative creatures are titans, who are also the builders of the universe. They have indeed brought life and order to many planets. Fel energy, on the other hand, is a kind of chaotic energy, representing the ultimate entropy, always destroying and annihilating everything. The demons of the Burning Legion are the embodiment of fel energy. With their desire for destruction, they attempt to drag the entire world into the abyss of chaos. The second pair of forces is the power of life and the power of death. Life manifests as the power of nature, which fuels the growth of all things in the universe. Under the influence of the power of life, the planet awakens and vegetation flourishes. Wild demigods are the representative species of the calendar of life. Death, however, manifests as the power of withering. This power is cold and ruthless, like the chill of winter. Wherever it goes, life is lost, leaving only the wails of the undead and the withered earth. Their representatives are the undead of the scourge. The last pair of forces is light and shadow. The expression of light is the power of holy light. It is warm and peaceful, like the rising sun, dispelling darkness and bringing hope. Their representative creatures, the Naru, are guided by the holy light and guard the peace and justice of the universe. The power of shadow is deep and mysterious, like the curtain of night, swallowing and corrupting everything. The Lords of the Void use the power of shadow to manipulate darkness and evil in an attempt to swallow the light of the entire universe. These 6 forces correspond to the 6 areas in the Dungeons & Dragons system: order and chaos, life and death, and good and evil. Therefore, light and shadow are essentially emotional and spiritual forces. The holy light of goodness and nobility represents the bravery and determination of life, while the shadow of evil and depravity reveals the ugly side of souls swallowed by darkness. Thus, the power of holy light and shadow is not only a kind of realistic energy, but also contains metaphysical, spiritual connotations. They come from the same source as spiritual energy, both originating from the soul of life. As the subordinates of the Lord of the Void, the ancient gods mastered the dark side of the Force. This is why the holy light can influence life, and the ancient gods can seduce and corrupt. Xalatoth dares to boast that it can elevate Ethan's psychic ability to a higher level, and this is also, don't worry, Krasis solemnly promised, as they were about to embark on their journey. I will provide you with Soli, support from outside, to ensure nothing goes wrong. Those black dragons will never find my traces. Returning to Neltharion's lair, the tunnel once used to transport ore became their secret passage, creating excellent conditions for their infiltration. This hidden path provided them with unique cover. Otherwise, even Malfurion, who had experienced hundreds of battles, would have difficulty finding a suitable breakthrough in this intricate underground maze. Most of the time while walking through the long and narrow tunnel, Maiev had to keep her arms close to Ethan's while holding the sharp moonblade in her hand. Her eyes, as sharp as an eagle's, stared ahead. The noise coming from the depths of the tunnel gradually increased, which made Ethan secretly happy. This noisy sound could serve as their cover and might distract the goblins, making it difficult for them to detect Ethan's infiltration amidst the chaos. Not long after, a faint light from the front penetrated the bend of the tunnel, bringing a glimmer of illumination into the dark space. The dim light made Maiev's nerves tense, but Ethan seemed calm. He reached out his hand and gently pressed Maiev's shoulder to comfort her. "Look over there," Ethan whispered softly. "I remember that, after we entered the cave, the black dragon chose the left passage." Maiev nodded slightly, indicating that she understood Ethan's instructions. She took a deep breath, stabilized her mind, and continued walking forward. The light ahead became brighter, and the noise grew more deafening. Turning the corner, they reached the former foundry. The light was not from the sun or moon, but from the red glow of metal in a high-heat state. Maiev's eyes widened, and she was so shocked by the sight before her that she almost cried out. The chaos and disorder here were far beyond what they had seen before. Inside the cave, the number of goblins was at least double what they had seen previously. They were busy shuttling back and forth like headless flies, as if every moment of pause would plunge them into a situation of life and death. This sense of urgency might be a true reflection of their survival. Some goblins were busy crushing large piles of ore. Despite their small stature, their movements were fast and powerful. The stones quickly turned into powder in their hands. Other goblins kept adding fuel to the towering furnace. The fire reflected their busy figures and also the tension and anxiety on their faces. Huge jars hung from several thick chains, and molten metal poured out of the jars like a waterfall into a huge mold. The metal droplets jumped in the mold and made a hissing sound, as if announcing the birth of a new creation. On the other side of the cave, several giant barrels stood quietly, filled with water. The molds filled with molten metal were then carefully placed into the buckets. The huge buckets immediately emitted billowing steam, shrouding the surrounding goblins in a white mist. The goblins in the steam were sweating profusely, but they seemed accustomed to such an environment and continued their work in an orderly manner. In the distance on the right side, the pavilions cast by the two deputy chiefs were casually placed aside. Some minor cracks on the pavement loomed under the light. No matter how the Black Dragon planned to use these armors, at this moment they had been reduced to a pile of useless scrap metal lying quietly in the corner, waiting for the fate of being forgotten. "I still don't understand why they did this," Malfurion muttered. "Does the Black Dragon want to make himself a suit of armor?" The priestess frowned deeply and said in deep thought, "That crazy guy can do all kinds of incredible things." She tried hard to suppress this doubt in her heart and turned her gaze to the left side of the cave. A secret path lay ahead. As they came into view, the group noticed 10 huge passages winding ahead. The priestess suddenly remembered that this was the direction Neltharion had come from before. "Look, that's it! We should go along that road," she too. LD Malfurion. Ethan nodded in agreement, but stretched out his arm to stop Maiev and Malfurion, who were about to move. "Wait a moment, there are goblins moving below," he cautioned. Compared to Maiev's dark vision, Ethan's psychic perception appeared to be more acute and reliable in this dark cave. The goblins he referred to were busy hauling away the debris left behind by mining. Maiev and Malfurion followed Ethan's guidance and carefully observed the goblins' work progress. They soon realized that at this rate, they might have to wait in their current hideout for quite some time. "We have to find a way to distract them, or at least delay them," Malfurion said anxiously, turning to Ethan for advice. Ethan thought for a moment, and then a flash of insight appeared in his eyes. "Perhaps we can use natural magic to create some interference." Malfurion's heart quickened as his eyes fell on the bag at his waist. Hidden inside were a few items that might come in handy. As a druid, he thrived in environments rich with nature. In a forest, he could manipulate the surrounding plants to join the battle at will. However, in a desert with no grass or in the cave where they were now, he needed to create an environment. Therefore, every time Malfurion ventured into a relatively harsh environment for a mission, he always carried various seeds with him. Just as he was about to reach into the bag, Neltharion's violent roar suddenly echoed through the cave, deafening and powerful enough to make the huge cavern tremble. "Meklo, I'm back. If you're not ready this time, I'll eat you all alive. I'll start with you as my appetizer." Chapter 772. Shocked, Deathwing turned out to be a jerk. Deep in the cave, the goblin foreman, wearing an apron that Ethan had noticed earlier, ran away in a hurry. He kicked the goblins around him, urging them to speed up their work, and hurried towards the upper passage, muttering something under his breath. Ethan, with his keen psychic perception, could hear the mutterings, which were some calculation formulas. Before Mekro could reach the entrance of the tunnel, Neltharion's massive body had already stepped out of the hole, exactly where Ethan and the others were heading. Neltharion's body blocked the entire entrance of the tunnel. Seeing this, Maiev couldn't help but blurt out a few curses. She had never seen Neltharion so obsessed with this armor. Fortunately, her curses were drowned out by the dragon's roar. "Mekro, you loser! You are worse than an insect. I can't bear it anymore. Has the new armor been finished yet?" Neltharion's roar echoed in the cave, making the walls tremble. "Two have been made. Yes, two, my master. Did you see it?" Mekro replied with a trembling voice. "Look, it's over there." He pointed shakily in one direction, where several goblins were pulling out a pair of huge metal armors from the mold, sweat dripping from their backs. Although the armor had been cooled in a giant wooden barrel, it still emitted a slight residual heat and made a hissing sound, as if it could burn one's skin. Neltharion glared at the armor and snorted coldly. "I hope this one is stronger than the tattered ones last time. The two from last time were simply trash among trash." The gray-haired Mecro nodded hurriedly and said solemnly, "Master, this armor is carefully cast from the finest source metal. It is stronger than steel. With your strength, these armors can withstand any impact and are as light as a feather when worn." To prove his point, he motioned to the goblins who forged the armor to lift one of them and show it to Neltharion. The goblins easily carried the heavy armor, much to Malfurion's surprise. He had originally thought it would take an extremely large number of goblins to move this behemoth. Neltharion stared at the armor, his eyes shining with desire. When the blazing armor passed by him, his breathing became rapid, as if he was attracted by the heat and light. "We only need to put the armor into the water tank, and after a short period of time," Mecro began to explain carefully. However, Neltharion suddenly roared, "No!" The old goblin Mecro was so frightened that he asked tremblingly, "My master, what do you mean?" The black dragon's eyes were fixed on the armor, an almost crazed light shining in them. "I'm going to put it on now," he growled. "However, the residual heat on the armor has not dissipated, and wearing it now will only increase your burden," Mecro said quickly. "Furthermore, to ensure the strength of the armor, the bolts need to be tightened at high temperatures. You should wait patiently a little longer." Mecro's advice was sincere, but the black dragon became impatient. He directly stretched out a huge claw and stomped on the ground. "I want it now!" Mecro was so frightened that he trembled all over and nodded quickly in response. Okay, Master Neltharion. It will be done right away, my Master Neltharion." He turned his head and roared at the goblins transporting the armor. "You lazy fools, get moving." Just as the goblins began to work in confusion, the black dragon had already walked towards a wide open area beside the wall. Neltharion's huge body slowly lay down, completely exposing the right side of his body. The massive gaping wound still had flames spurting out from time to time, and you could feel the black dragon's pain just by looking at it. "Get that armor quickly," Neltharion roared. "Hurry up, you idiots." Malfurion and the priestess looked at each other, filled with confusion. He frowned and muttered, "What on earth do they want to do with that armor?" Maeve shook her head, indicating that she was also confused. "Get the bolts ready. Get the bolts Addy, quick." At this time, Mecluo began to nervously instruct the goblins. The higher the temperature, the better. A dozen goblins quickly divided into two groups and busily put a giant pair of fire tongues into the blazing furnace. The three of them watched as the goblins extracted a huge bolt from the furnace. The bolt was almost as tall as Maiev. "Hammer team, prepare the hammer quickly," Mecluo ordered again. Following a noisy rubbing sound, there was a commotion from the right side of the secret room. A dozen goblins laboriously pushed a huge machine, similar to a catapult, towards the black dragon. The machine was equipped with a massive metal head. One end was flat, and the other end was connected to iron chains and pulleys. The three of them were captivated by this complex device. Ethan from Blue Star immediately understood its purpose. He secretly admired the goblins' craftsmanship, while the two night elves, full of curiosity, were utterly confused and couldn't figure out the machine's purpose. "Armor!" Neltharion's roar became anxious and impatient. "Why are you so slow? Get the armor quickly and follow my orders." The goblins were in a panic. They hurriedly carried the heavy armor like a group of disturbed ants. As they cautiously approached the towering body of the black dragon, they almost lost their balance several times. It wasn't because the armor was too heavy, but because the hot air spurted from Neltharion's mouth was like strong winds and huge waves, making the little greenskins sway like boats in a storm. Finally, Mecluo waved his hand, and the goblins worked together to push the armor forward. There was a loud clang as the armor hit Neltharion's body, covered with hard scales, like a meteorite. The sound of impact and the friction of scales created a harsh noise. The three bystanders were startled by the sudden loud noise and couldn't help but take a step back. When the armor came into contact with the black dragon's scales, it made a burning sound. The terrible wounds on the black dragon's body caused the armor to shake a few times when it fell, but in the end, it still faintly covered Neltharion's body. "The armor has been stabilized," Mecluo shouted to the goblins, with a hint of relief in his voice. "Quick, install the bolts and secure it." Malfurion stood there, gaping at all this. He couldn't believe his eyes. They actually plan to nail it to the dragon. Is this family crazy? It's really crazy. Meanwhile, Maiev remained silent. Her eyes narrowed into a thin line, and she clutched the moonblade in her hand so tightly that her fingers turned white from excessive exertion. Only Ethan was not surprised by this and seemed unusually calm. He had already foreseen all this and just stood there quietly, staring at the black dragon deeply, as if he was contemplating something. Contrary to what Malfurion and the others thought, what happened just now did not anger the Earthguard. Instead, his face was filled with almost intoxicating joy. His smile was as bright as the midsummer sun, and his big mouth seemed capable of swallowing the whole world. His crimson eyes were half-lidded under the smile, shining with anticipation. His chest rose and fell like rough waves, showing his inner excitement and expectation. Under the gaze of the black dragon, the goblins were busy manipulating the tongs, carefully transporting a huge bolt and aiming it at several round holes on the edge of the armor. Malfurion's eyes swept across the holes as fast as lightning, silently counting. There were more than a dozen. Do they really plan to put these bolts through the holes and then drive them into the black dragon's indestructible body? The black dragon's shaking body once again caused a lot of trouble for the goblins. The first two attempts failed, but on the third try, they finally succeeded. The goblins worked meticulously, sliding the bolt into a hole in the armor. The bolt slid halfway in, and the goblins nervously clamped it firmly with long fire tongues, trying their best to prevent it from falling. With quick eyes and quick hands, Meklua waved to another group of goblins and shouted loudly, "Is the hammer ready? Once the bolt is in place, hit it hard!" The goblins responded with grunts and strained to drag the heavy hammer to Neltharion. The dragon's half-open eyes shone with hope as he watched the goblins busy adjusting the position of the hammer with anticipation, as if he couldn't wait to feel the unique experience of pain and pleasure from the bolt penetrating his body. This time, Mekluo, the goblin leader, planned to take action himself. Despite his age, he was still strong and agile. He jumped onto the black dragon's huge body with a few quick movements and then lowered his head to carefully examine the embedded bolt. Under his command, other goblins carefully fine-tuned the bolt's position to ensure it was in optimal condition. After completing all this, Mekluo jumped down and landed steadily back on the ground. "Big guy, pull harder!" Mekluo shouted loudly, his voice echoing in the cave and inspiring every goblin. The group of goblins controlling the hammer moved upon hearing the command. They grabbed the chain tightly and pulled with all their strength. Although the two night elves did not fully understand the inner workings of this strange machine built by the goblins, they had a clear idea of its purpose. With the efforts of all the goblins, the flat side of the huge metal hammer hit the bolt with thunderous force. With a deafening bang, the hammer and bolt collided violently. The power of this blow caused the bolt to sink deeply into the black dragon's flesh, leaving only a short section exposed. Neltharion endured great pain and let out a roar. However, this roar was mixed with an indescribable moan of pleasure. This painful sensation was intertwined with pleasure, making him feel an unprecedented stimulation. "Do it again!" The black dragon's roar echoed in the cave. "Do it again! Make this feeling even more intense!" Chapter 773, Sneaking into the Cave. Seeing Deathwing's posture, Ethan's eyes revealed indescribable surprise. He looked at the black dragon in front of him, and the astonishment in his heart surged like waves. The majestic Deathwing, that fearsome and powerful being from legends, now actually showed a strange kind of excitement and enjoyment in front of everyone. Ethan couldn't help but start to wonder if this powerful black dragon had some unknown quirk. Could it be that he was secretly? However, regardless of whether the black dragon was trembling or not, the work of putting on the armor continued. At this time, Mekluo once again jumped onto the black dragon's body. He leaned down and carefully observed the position of the bolt, then nodded slightly, his experienced eyes shining with satisfaction. He gave instructions to his men to remove the heavy hammer. Mekluo jumped off the black dragon lightly, and as his feet landed firmly on the ground, he shouted loudly, "Pull up!" Following this order, the other goblins responded immediately. They struggled to pull the chain with all their strength. The pulley began to rotate rapidly, and with a rumbling sound, the hammer fell heavily again, hitting the bolt. Neltharion's roar this time was even more deafening, drowning out the sound of the hammer. The bolt dug deeper into his flesh as he howled. "We're in," the goblin leader announced excitedly. The black dragon Neltharion followed closely with a burst of wild laughter. "Go and remove a bolt," McLuo immediately ordered. "Move quickly, don't waste time." In the tunnel, Malfurion's body was shaking like leaves in the autumn wind. He collapsed on the ground, leaning against the hard wall, his eyes full of confusion and fear. He wants to wear all that heavy armor. Why is this happening? Perhaps he is trying to protect himself. Maiev guessed, her eyes still lingering on the strong yet light armor. "Look, that armor is as solid as a rock, yet very light. It indeed provides good protection. But if it is just for defense, Neltharion's original scales are enough," Ethan immediately retorted. "The black dragon has the power of the earth. The scales of the black dragon family are the hardest among the 5 dragon families, and the scales of the black dragon king are the toughest among all black dragons. With such scales, why would he bother with armor?" He paused and continued. "The real function of the armor may be to prevent his body from falling apart. But how could he bear such pain?" Malfurion's voice was filled with surprise that could not be concealed. "Look at how deep that thing penetrated. And that armor, it's still emitting a blazing red light. He may be crazy, but maybe his madness can be used to our advantage." After Ethan said this, he looked at Malfurion with a knowing look. Malfurion's eyes flashed with understanding, and he asked eagerly, "What do you mean?" Ethan did not answer directly, but stretched out his hand and pointed in a certain direction in the cave. "Look at the eyes of those goblins." Everyone's eyes followed Ethan's hand, and they saw that the goblins were looking at Neltharion intently, their eyes full of awe and fear. Neltharion, on the other hand, seemed to be immersed in his own world, unaware of the gazes of those goblins. At first, the druid Malfurion did not understand what Ethan was referring to, but as his eyes swept across the tunnel, he suddenly understood. He noticed that every goblin had stopped what they were doing and gathered aside, eagerly anticipating the astonishing scene that was about to take place. If they were to cross the corridor quietly at this time, they would be like ghosts, and no one would notice them. Although the behavior of the goblins is excusable and does not require too much blame, it undoubtedly provides a golden opportunity for Ethan and Maiev. "We have to calculate exactly when they're going to install the next bolt," Ethan whispered, watching the goblins at work. "Understood," Maiev replied, her eyes narrowing with determination. "It seems we don't need to wait too long," Maiev responded. At this moment, the goblins holding fire tongs walked towards the place where the bolts were cast. They skillfully picked up a bolt and gently placed it into the furnace. Even standing in the tunnel, Ethan could feel the blazing heat radiating from the furnace. When the elves slowly took the bolt out of the furnace, it had turned red and emitted a fiery light. "Get ready for action," Ethan urged. The 3 of them stared nervously at the busy goblins, who were carrying heavy bolts and slowly approaching Neltharion. The black dragon was fully focused, his eyes tightly locked on the bolts that were about to be installed. His concentration and desire were as intense as if he were staring at a lover reunited after a long separation. "Faster! Faster!" Earthguard Neltharion urged in his low and powerful voice. The bolt was carefully lifted and placed on the other side of the armor. At this moment, Ethan, Maiev, and Malfurion were all ready to sprint. They held their breath and watched the bolt slowly approach the reserved hole. As the bolt was about to slide in, the 3 of them acted quickly, like arrows released from a bowstring. Maiev held the moonblade, shining with cold light, and bravely led the way. Her cold eyes conveyed that if any reckless goblin accidentally discovered them, she would send him to meet the King of Hell without hesitation. In the cave below them, Mekro was shouting at the top of his lungs at the goblins manipulating the hammer. The huge machine began to make a creaking sound. The harsh noise drowned out the subtle sounds made by the 3 intruders, providing them with some cover. While the goblins struggled to hammer the bolts into the armor, the 3 of them had successfully covered half the distance. However, at this moment, the cave suddenly became silent, as if even the air had solidified. This unexpected silence caught Malfurion, Maiev, and Ethan off guard. They immediately froze in place, even breathing cautiously, for fear of breaking the fragile calm and exposing their presence. Did Deathwing discover us? A flash of panic crossed Malfurion's mind, and he subconsciously looked at Ethan. Maiev's hand unconsciously touched Ethan's hand. Ethan felt the moisture in the priestess's palm and knew the tension and anxiety in her heart at that moment. He gently squeezed her hand, trying to convey some strength and comfort to her. In this situation, if Neltharion really discovered them, they would not be able to deal with it at all. They would not be able to run. Ethan knew this very well, so he had been quietly preparing magic in case of emergency. Malfurion also put his hands in the pockets on his waist, grabbing a handful of seeds, ready to scatter them if anything happened. If the goblins discovered them, the two druids would not hesitate to take action and create vines to entangle the goblins and their master Neltharion, if they could. This was their only chance to escape, and they had to seize it. Fortunately, everything was safe. It was just the goblins calculating the angle. Mekluo's voice echoed in the cave again as he gave orders loudly, and everything seemed to return to normal. The hammer was ready to strike again. The three of them continued to move forward, and soon Maiev reached the end of the path first. She looked back at Malfurion, who was at the rear, and motioned for him to follow. Malfurion nodded and rushed to her and Ethan's side. Behind them came the loud cry of the goblin leader again. "Pull up!" This sound relieved the tension in their hearts a little. At least, they were safe for now. Chapter 774, The Power of the Dragon Soul. Ethan, Maiev, and Malfurion rushed into the dim corridor one after another like arrows. The sound of hammers behind them echoed in their minds, reminiscent of countless bees buzzing. The scenes of the Black Dragon Neltharion's crazed, irrational, and horrific behavior lingered in their minds like a nightmare. At this moment, they, at least Malfurion and Maiev, understood more deeply why Crassus and Ronan called him a complete madman. Ethan gradually slowed down, knowing that Maiev and Malfurion behind him needed time to recover from the shock. However, under the current circumstances, he could not give them much breathing space. He could only encourage them eagerly. Okay, now we still have the last step to go. That step was to find the location where the mysterious disc was stored and then take it away without hesitation. Maiev also knew in her heart that what Ethan said was true, but this did not mean that they had a guaranteed victory. After all, there must be other unknown dangers lurking in Neltharion's lair. She looked around alertly, fearing that something terrible would emerge from the darkness at any moment. At this moment, another deafening noise came from behind, followed by the blood-curdling laughter of the Black Dragon. This laughter echoed in the corridor like a ghost, instilling fear in their hearts. Ethan heard the laughter and couldn't help but quicken his pace. They must complete the task as soon as possible and escape from this terrible place. It took far longer than Ethan expected to reach the first turn. Every step in the depths of Deathwing's lair was full of unknowns, and they needed to be vigilant. They could not be sure whether the Black Dragon had set up guards at the hidden parts of the passage, so they had to proceed carefully. This slow advance made their journey even longer. We can't delay any longer. Finally, Ethan became impatient and said urgently. They immediately quickened their pace and almost started running in the passage. However, even so, the time to reach the second turn did not seem to be shortened by their eagerness. But Ethan could feel that they were getting closer to their goal. Carefully walking through the winding passages, Ethan stopped from time to confirm their position. Finally, they came to a narrow and hidden cave. Ethan stood at the entrance of the cave, feeling an inexplicable sensation in his heart. He would never forget this position in his life. He stared ahead quietly, lost in thought. The strange feelings he had felt when he touched that particular stone began to emerge. "It's right there," he said, stretching out his hand and pointing out the hidden stone to Malfurion. "It's right there, to the right of the stone, and to the left of the crack." However, Malfurion was clearly confused by Ethan's guidance. "I hope your judgment is accurate," he frowned. Stepping into the secret room and touching the storage place of the dragon soul was by no means an easy task. not to mention how dangerous it was. They could still clearly hear the clanging of the hammer and the thundering roar of the black dragon coming from the depths of the cave from time to time. These sounds were like urging drums, making the three of them dare not slack off in the slightest. Ethan took the initiative and stepped forward to solve the mystery of the mechanism himself. At the same time, Malfurion stood guard at the entrance of the cave, looking around vigilantly, ready to respond to emergencies at any time. Maiev, on the other hand, stared intently at Ethan's every slight movement, as if he were touching some taboo. Once Ethan was in trouble, she would not hesitate to attack to save him. As Ethan gradually approached the core of the mechanism, the aura from the ancient god became clearer and clearer. This aura was powerful and dark, as if it could swallow all light. In addition, he also noticed the numerous magical traps set by Neltharion. They were like invisible nets, waiting for prey to fall into them. Some magics were very conspicuous and dangerous. Others were so deeply hidden that they were difficult to detect. Ethan relied on his extraordinary wisdom and insight to analyze the nature of these magics one by one, skillfully dispelling or neutralizing their power. The whole process went much smoother than he expected, which made him secretly grateful. Malfurion was amazed by Ethan's skill and courage. He had originally thought that Death's calculation would set up more bizarre and unpredictable magic to stop them. When Ethan finally broke through to the core of the magic trap, a soul-shaking voice resonated in his heart. It was the N'Zoth realm that had been triggered. At this moment, Ethan felt an inexplicable force throbbing in his soul, and he tried his best to endure this strange sensation. Time seemed to have stopped, and every second felt like an eternity of suffering. However, Ethan was prepared. He quickly took out the shadow crystal, which suddenly emitted a deep and mysterious light. Its power instantly enveloped the strange atmosphere around him. The crystal contained the power of Xal'atath. Her strategy was to use her own domain to crowd out N'Zoth's domain, thus rendering N'Zoth's trap ineffective. Although N'Zoth's power was extremely formidable compared to Xal'atath, which was only a remnant, this did not mean that Xal'atath couldn't handle a fraction of N'Zoth's power. After all, the trap N'Zoth set was like rootless water, and Ethan continuously provided power to the shadow crystal, doubling its strength. After a few minutes, the soul-shaking sound finally disappeared, signifying that N'Zoth's power had been completely expelled. Ethan had just cracked the last protective magic, and nothing happened. This made him breathe a sigh of relief, and a surge of victory filled his heart. Xal'atath's method had been successful, and they had successfully broken through N'Zoth's defenses. Ethan then reached out and grasped the edge of the rock tightly. He had anticipated the weight of this rock, but when he actually tried to pull it, he still felt its unimaginable weight. For a super-large creature like Deathwing, this was just a small pebble, but for Ethan, it was a significant challenge. However, he did not flinch. Instead, he transformed into his chimera state. Relying on the immense strength granted by the wilderness transformation, he slowly pulled out the side of the stone closest to him. As the rock moved, a black hole gradually emerged, just big enough for him to crawl into. Ethan had originally thought that the cave would be dark and deep. However, when he looked inside, a dazzling light suddenly hit him. The light was so intense that he could hardly open his eyes. He felt a burning pain in his eyes, but endured the discomfort, trying hard to let his eyes adapt to the sudden brightness. After a while, when his eyes gradually adjusted to the light in the cave, he was surprised to find the dragon soul quietly placed not far away. The legendary disc was set on a gorgeous red cloth, spread out like a huge sail. The dragon soul was gently placed in it like a newborn baby. The disc was small and delicate, like an exquisite and clear work of art. Ethan could easily hold it with one hand. Although the disc exuded a bright light, its appearance was very ordinary, without any ostentation. However, Ethan knew the power of this seemingly mundane object. This was the masterpiece of the Black Dragon, an artifact containing the power of destruction and rebirth. Therefore, he had to treat this treasure carefully to avoid unpredictable disasters. Deeply excited, Ethan turned around and reported the good news to his two teammates. "We succeeded." These words dispelled the tension and anxiety in the air, allowing the other two to breathe a sigh of relief. Their faces showed long-lost smiles. Malfurion felt even more relieved and began to carefully plan an escape route at the entrance of the cave. He looked around, feeling the airflow and considering their next steps. At the entrance of the cave, Ethan's eyes lit up as he said, "There is wind here. Maybe there's an exit, and we might be able to leave from here." This proposal was immediately approved by Maiev. As long as they could leave this dangerous place as soon as possible, they were all for it. Before leaving, Ethan once again focused his attention on the golden disc. So far, they had been lucky. Neltharion's crazed roars had covered up their movements. He carefully inspected the power surrounding the dragon soul in the cave and confirmed that nothing would cause him harm. It was clear that Deathwing believed his treasure was absolutely safe here, and did not want other spells to affect the disc, so he had not set additional magic around it. Ethan took a closer look at the forces surrounding the dragon soul in the cave and found that nothing would harm him. Obviously, Deathwing believed his treasure was absolutely safe here and did not need to set any magic inside. Ethan immediately leaned over the disc, feeling the immense power contained in this small object, and couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with emotion. In the black dragon's claws, the disc seemed larger, but he knew it was just a psychological effect. In reality, the disc was small and delicate, yet it held the power to destroy the world. "Ethan!" Maiev's urgent voice suddenly broke the silence in the secret room. "Have you got the disc? We must leave this place as soon as possible. The atmosphere here makes me feel more and more uneasy." Ethan's heart jolted, and the twisted and terrifying image of Neltharion instantly appeared in his mind. Not daring to delay, he quickly stuffed the golden disc into his space pocket and sealed it tightly. As the disc was safely hidden, the light in the cave suddenly dimmed. Nemos Skents. Chapter 775. Escape from the Dragon's Lair. With the acquisition of the Dragon Soul, Ethan felt a surge of excitement. Despite his extensive knowledge of the history of World of Warcraft, this was the first time he had obtained such a powerful artifact. He raised his head and saw Maiev looking at him anxiously. Taking a deep breath, Ethan calmed his excitement and prepared to step out of the secret room, ready to leave this land full of unknowns and dangers. However, just as he was about to step out, he realized he had made a fatal mistake. A deafening howl of a giant dragon suddenly echoed through the cave, filled with anger and violence, as if it were about to bring the entire cave down. Hearing these noises, Ethan immediately sensed something was wrong and stayed where he was. In an instant, he figured it out. This was not the dragon soul causing trouble. The sound he heard was actually a magical alarm set by the black dragon, Neltharion. The cunning dragon had not set a trap directly on the disc, but had cleverly arranged the magic around the secret room. Once someone stepped out with the dragon soul, the alarm would sound immediately. The trap was so cleverly designed that even Ethan's keen senses had failed to detect it. As the dragon's screams gradually dissipated, a deeper and more terrifying sound began to echo from the cave walls. It was the howl of Deathwing, full of violence and madness, shaking the entire cave to the brink of collapse. Neltharion reveled in every moment of pain. Each time a bolt was hammered into his skin covered with hard scales, he felt one step closer to becoming a true god. He imagined himself wearing indestructible armor and holding the disc containing endless power, becoming truly invincible. "Hurry up!" the black dragon roared. "You losers! Hurry up!" His patience was running thin, and he was extremely dissatisfied with the slow progress of the goblins. The goblin almost had his hammer at the ready. Mekro held the huge hammer tightly, sweat dripping from his forehead. He nervously directed his men to make final preparations for the last 10 blows. However, at that moment, a voice that frightened all the Earth Guards suddenly echoed in the cave. Neltharion thought he would never hear this sound again, but he heard it just a few days after setting up the trap. The giant dragon was so frightened that he involuntarily kicked out, sending Hammer, Meklo, and the other goblins flying. "My disc! My dragon soul!" Neltharion let out a blood-curdling roar. How dare someone steal it? His rage and terror made the entire cave tremble. The goblins, terrified by the sudden change, fled the huge secret room in panic, leaving the black dragon roaring alone in the cave. Neltharion struggled to get up from the ground, ignoring the fact that all the goblins had fled, and the third metal armor on his body was only half finished. As he quickly turned towards the deep corridor, the armor plates swayed in the wind, making a rustling sound. Anger drove him to turn around suddenly, and his heavy feet and huge tail swept across the table, furnace, and molds mercilessly. For a moment, the entire cave was in chaos. Flames suddenly burst into the sky all around, and a furnace exploded, unable to withstand the heat inside. Burning debris flew everywhere like meteors, and the splashing sparks ignited the surrounding flammable materials. The fire spread quickly. However, to Neltharion, this chaos was of no consequence. His heart was filled with anger and anxiety. Someone dared to touch his beloved artifact, which he would never tolerate. He wanted to find these thieves and make them pay for their crimes. He wanted them to taste all the pain and die slowly, for such punishment was insignificant compared to the crimes they had committed. Neltharion's anger reached its peak as he thought about the invaders who dared to steal from him. They had no choice but to act. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead and ran directly outside. The most important thing now was to escape from this dangerous place with the Dragon soul. Ethan, Maiev, come on! Maybe there is an exit ahead. If there is wind here, there may be an exit. Malfurion urged, following the guidance of the previous airflow and leading the two of them forward. Under Malfurion's leadership, the three quickly and nimbly crawled towards the possible escape route. Ethan was the second to enter the cave entrance, then turned around and pulled Maiev in. Before Maiev could catch her breath, Ethan dragged her deeper into the cave. As they navigated the narrow passages, they could only hear their own breathing and hurried footsteps. There may be an exit ahead. The wind means there is hope. Ethan repeated Malfurion's words to encourage himself and his companions. The trail was filled with an eerie atmosphere, with bones and waste scattered everywhere. Malfurion, leading the charge, frowned, the disgust on his face clearly visible. He tried his best to avoid the disgusting waste and led the team forward quickly. However, their hopes were soon dashed. They encountered two dead ends one after another, finding no exit. The airflow Malfurion had felt before only came from small gaps, which were impossible to pass through. "It's not surprising," Maiev muttered with a wry smile, her voice tinged with disappointment and exhaustion. "The Black Dragon was indeed cautious enough not to leave any way out. We are truly desperate now." Heavy footsteps echoed from outside the cave, like thunder, making the cave tremble. Malfurion cautiously poked his head out from the edge of the secret room and saw the massive form of the Black Dragon King slowly approaching the entrance. "Deathwing. He is coming." Malfurion's voice revealed deep fear. At this moment, he deeply felt that this title from the future was so appropriate for the Black Dragon, especially after witnessing those horrific scenes with his own eyes. "Then we will fight him to the death," Maiev declared, her voice firm and decisive, her expression serious and resolute. "We want him to know that we are not timid people." Ethan was also thinking intensely about how to escape. At this moment, Zolototh's voice sounded softly in his ears. "Master, you can use the Dragon Soul." Ethan was stunned for a moment. He initially refused the suggestion. As everyone knew, the Dragon Soul contained dark magic. He had personally seen the various changes that occurred when the Black Dragon used it. Would this thing have a similar impact on him? He was filled with doubts and fears. But at that moment, another deafening roar came from outside, and the entire cave began to shake. Rocks from the roof of the cave were dislodged and fell, some of which were fatal. Ethan knew they had no time to hesitate anymore. "Ethan, what do you want to do?" A trace of uneasiness flashed in Maiev's eyes. She stared at Ethan closely and saw him quickly taking out the Dragon Soul. The disc shone in Ethan's hand, and the light poured out like a waterfall. In an instant, the entire cave was filled with this bright light, and the strong light even penetrated the cave wall and shot into the dark corridor. At this moment, they had no choice but to act. They seemed to have become a beacon in the darkness, impossible to conceal. Even if Neltharion had been unaware of their hiding place before, he would surely be drawn to this light now, knowing their exact location. Ethan took a deep breath, gripping the Dragon Soul tightly with both hands. He raised it above his head and aimed it at the widest wall in the secret room. "This is our last lifeline," he murmured to himself, his tone resolute. "You must become one with it," Zalatoth's voice whispered in Ethan's ear, gently reminding him, "Let it become a part of you, and you also become a part of it." Chapter 776, Dragon Breath and Blizzard. Although Ethan had never studied the Dragon Soul in depth, when he slowly poured his power into the artifact, he quickly felt the mystery contained within it. The mechanism of this powerful artifact is similar to that of the Holy Grail in the moon-shaped world. Both carry the power to make wishes, functioning like machines that can realize dreams. Making a wish to the Holy Grail consumes the magic power stored within it. Unlike the Holy Grail, the Dragon Soul does not consume its own magic power to realize wishes, but absorbs the user's magic power as a price. This mechanism is akin to a 9-ring prayer permanently engraved on the artifact. As long as the user is willing to pay, it can respond to their inner desires. However, this alone cannot fully explain why the Dragon Soul has become an artifact that everyone is in awe of today. In this world, there are no miracles without reason, and the realization of every wish requires a corresponding price. The power of prayer is indeed formidable, but the consumption it brings is also staggering. Although the Dragon Soul eliminates the need for cumbersome rituals required to activate prayer, the equivalent energy required to realize the wish has not been reduced. This is what makes it unique. It requires the user to carefully weigh every wish, as every 10 prayers mean a significant consumption of one's own energy. If you want to realize your wish, you need to consume an equivalent amount of energy, which directly limits the caster. He cannot use prayer to do whatever he wants, unlike using the Holy Grail. However, the magic of the Dragon Soul does not stop there. It also has another amazing feature, energy boost. When the user injects their own power into the artifact, the Dragon Soul can amplify this power dozens or even hundreds of times during the prayer process. This amplification of energy enables users to realize more ambitious wishes and create more astonishing miracles. It is by relying on the peerless power endowed by the Dragon Soul that Neltharion can challenge the entire dragon army on his own and become an unrivaled overlord. At this moment, the Dragon Soul fell into Ethan's hands, and he was ready to retaliate against his own kind, using the Dragon Soul to fight Neltharion himself. He took a deep breath, slowly closed his eyes, followed Zalatoth's guidance, focused all his attention on the disc, and let his thoughts gradually sink in. As soon as Ethan touched the disc, he immediately felt its inner restlessness and uneasiness. This was not a physical feeling, but more like a resonance deep in his soul, making him realize that there was definitely something wrong with the source of the Dragon Soul. The disc does not seem to belong to this real world. In the process of the amazing increase in the magic power of the disc, Ethan could clearly sense that the extra power seemed to come from a place outside the world, which also explained why it was so powerful to him. The spellcaster who uses it is so destructive. Facing this unprecedented experience, Ethan felt a deep sense of fear and uneasiness in his heart. He almost wanted to give up, but he knew that in the current situation he could not retreat and must persevere. Zalatoth's voice seemed to ring in his ears again. "Become one with it." So, Ethan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to establish a deeper connection with the Dragon Soul. He felt his consciousness gradually merge with the artifact, and the power of the two began to blend and penetrate each other. This process was painful and difficult, but Ethan persisted until he felt 10 unprecedented forces throughout his body. And just like that, he succeeded. This force was powerful and dark, seducing Ethan and corroding his soul. At that moment, Ethan felt as if he had become omnipotent, and even had an impulse to break out of this passage and start a life-and-death battle with Deathwing and all the black dragons in the cave. But at this moment, Ethan's mental barrier finally into the passage with unstoppable force. The intense heat clashed with the icy blizzard, creating a violent reaction. Steam hissed and filled the air, obscuring vision and making the cave feel like a boiling cauldron. Ethan's mind raced as he struggled to maintain control over the Dragon Soul's power. The clash of elements was taking a toll on him, but he couldn't afford to falter. He had to protect Maiev and Malfurion. The priestess's sharp eyes never left Ethan, her concern evident. "Ethan, are you sure you can handle this?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. Ethan nodded, though his face was strained. "I have to. There's no other choice." Malfurion, who had been leading the way, turned back to offer his support. "We need to keep moving. The longer we stay here, the more dangerous it becomes." With a final, determined push, Ethan channeled the last of his strength into the dragon soul. The icy blizzard intensified, pushing back the lava dragon breath just enough to create a narrow path. "Go now," he shouted. Maiev and Malfurion didn't hesitate. They sprinted through the narrow opening, with Ethan following closely behind. The heat from the lava was almost unbearable, but they pressed on, driven by the urgency of their situation. As they emerged from the cave, the cool night air was a stark contrast to the inferno they had just escaped. They paused for a moment to catch their breath, their bodies trembling from the exertion and adrenaline. Ethan looked back at the cave entrance, his heart still pounding. "We can't stay here. Neltharion will be after us soon." Malfurion nodded in agreement. "We need to find a safe place to regroup and plan our next move." Maiev placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You did well, Ethan. We wouldn't have made it without you." Ethan managed a weak smile, though his mind was still reeling from the encounter. "Let's keep moving. We can't afford to let our guard down." The three of them set off into the night, their path uncertain, but their resolve unwavering. The power of the dragon soul had saved them this time, but Ethan knew that the battle was far from over. The dark force within him was a constant reminder of the dangers they faced, both from their enemies and from within themselves. As they disappeared into the shadows, the cave behind them rumbled ominously, a testament to the fury of the black dragon they had narrowly escaped. The night was far from over, and their journey had only just begun. The lava dragon's breath surged forward with an aura of destruction. Wherever it passed, the air distorted from the intense heat, as if even the space itself was being scorched. Soon, the icy blizzard collided with the hot lava dragon's breath, creating a deafening roar and a dazzling light. The cold snowflakes melted rapidly under the high temperature, but new snowflakes continuously formed, creating an indestructible ice wall. Gradually, the lava dragon's breath lost its power and momentum against the ice wall, eventually condensing and stagnating. Ethan himself was deeply shocked by this thrilling magical showdown. He took a breath, quickly regained his composure, and continued climbing. Maev's eyes widened in disbelief at the changes caused by Ethan. The entire tunnel seemed to be redecorated with ice and snow, like a magnificent ice sculpture born in the mountains. The priestess was clearly shocked by the immense power displayed by the dragon soul, and her heart was filled with unease. "Ethan, you have to be careful with that thing," she reminded him. "I can't believe that 10 such small objects can release such a huge amount of energy." "You are right," Malfurion echoed. "This is indeed an incredible artifact." During their escape, they remained amazed by the magic of the dragon soul. They found the path under their feet surprisingly easy to walk, as if it had been carefully dug by professional craftsmen rather than created by magic. In addition to the gentle stairs, there were 2 rows of handrails on both sides of the tunnel, making it easier for them to navigate the sea mountain road. As a result, their traveling speed was nearly twice as fast as it had been in the cave. "I feel the wind blowing," Maiev said cautiously, with a hint of excitement in her tone. "This time, we are definitely not heading to a dead end." Hearing Maev's words rekindled the flame of hope in Malfurion's heart, and they involuntarily quickened their pace. Soon, a whooshing sound reached their ears, and they realized it was the wind that the priestess had mentioned. "Look, it's right there!" Ethan pointed forward excitedly and shouted, "The entrance to the cave!" They finally reached the end of the cave and emerged on a mountain slope. A cool breeze blew in their faces, as if welcoming them to freedom from that hellish nest. The 3 of them took a deep breath of fresh air, savoring the beauty and tranquility of nature. At that moment, they felt reborn. But leaving the cave was only the first step. It did not mean they were completely out of danger. They knew it wouldn't be long before Deathwing realized they had escaped. He and his black dragons would surely follow and launch a relentless pursuit. "We have to hide the disc," the priestess reminded. "Deathwing can detect its light, which will expose us." The power of the disc could not be completely concealed. Even if hidden deep in his pocket, Neltharion might still sense its presence. However, putting the disc away would at least give them a glimmer of hope for escape. Ethan carefully placed the dragon soul into the space bag and tied the mouth of the bag tightly, as if this could seal away the danger. Chapter 777, Searching the Mountain. Maev stepped forward again, taking the lead in the team and shouldering the crucial task of guiding the way. In this three-person team, although two of them had the ability to transform into wilderness creatures and soar into the sky as birds, they chose a safer method of walking. Flying in front of a giant dragon would make them conspicuous targets, essentially inviting death. The high altitude of the mountains made the weather extremely harsh. The biting cold wind carried ice and snow, and the silver-covered slopes resembled a white canvas. Priestess Maev was extremely cautious with every step she took. She gently tested the depth of the snow with her toes, wary of accidentally stepping into a trap. She was keenly aware that some seemingly solid snow concealed deadly dangers, and a single misstep could send them plummeting off a cliff. Fortunately, Neltharion primarily used the cave resources on the mountainside to forge his metal armor. This provided some relief, as their current location was not the most treacherous mountain peak. Although the road ahead remained difficult and dangerous, at least they didn't have to traverse the entire mountain. Ethan was hopeful and firmly believed they could reach the safety zone at the foot of Tian Shan Mountain before dawn. However, fate seemed to have other plans. Suddenly, a massive figure flew through the air at a staggering speed, causing the three of them to tense up instantly. Ethan quickly embraced Maev and threw both of them down into the snow, trying to avoid being seen. Malfurion followed suit, hiding in the same manner. They held their breath, nervously praying they wouldn't be discovered. At that moment, they were like three little quails in the snow, trembling and hoping for fate's blessing. The behemoth was the crazed guardian of the earth. Perhaps it was because the black dragon had fallen into a state of madness that they managed to escape temporarily. The black dragon angrily searched for stolen treasures in the area, spitting hot lava at every mountain peak it passed. The lava struck the mountains with such force that entire peaks collapsed instantly. Boulders rained down like a torrential storm, hitting the ground and raising clouds of dust. Fortunately, the dragon didn't seem to use magic to detect their area. Otherwise, they would have been discovered with no chance of escape. Malfurion raised his head and looked at the sky with a frown. "Damn it, where's that crazy dragon going?" Ethan also raised his head, watching the black dragon's movements intently. "From my perspective, his flight direction seems to be..." Before he could finish speaking, Deathwing suddenly changed direction in the air and flew straight towards them. In that moment, the air seemed to freeze, and they felt an unprecedented sense of oppression. "Run!" Maev shouted, breaking the brief deadlock. The three of them immediately sprang up from the ground and ran forward with all their might. Their goal was a massive rock formation that might offer them a chance of survival. Ethan glanced back as he ran and saw the dragon's figure growing larger in his field of vision. From the black dragon's ferocious expression, it was hard to tell if he had spotted them, but there was no doubt he was closing in quickly. Just as they leaped onto the rock formation, Ethan heard the blood-curdling roar of the black dragon, signaling that it was about to unleash its lava breath again. "Quick, come here!" Priestess Maev pointed urgently at a huge protruding rock. The edge of the rock seemed to offer some shelter. However, in this violent storm, could any place truly be a safe harbor? An earth-shattering explosion suddenly erupted on the hillside. With a deafening roar, the rock formation seemed to be torn apart. In an instant, the rock formation they were on disappeared without a trace, leaving only fragments scattered everywhere. The temperature in the air rose suddenly, and the ice and snow that originally covered the hillside melted rapidly under the hot lava. Thousands of years of accumulated snow instantly melted into huge chunks of ice, sliding down the hillside with watermarks, and finally shattering at the bottom of the mountain with a deafening noise. On one side of the mountain, Puddles formed by melting ice and snow made a hissing sound, as if narrating the tragedy of this catastrophe. Deathwing hovered over the ruins, his blazing dragon eyes revealing satisfaction and arrogance as he stared at the destruction beneath his feet. However, he didn't seem to notice the three people hiding behind the rock. The giant dragon slowly flew closer to the ground, his nose making a snoring sound from time to time to express his disgust for the ruin. With a deafening roar, he turned around and flapped his wings again. This time, he flew towards the mountain where his nest was located. Under the shelter of the rocks, the three people stood up in disgrace, their bodies covered with dust and melted snow. Ethan coughed a few times and hurriedly checked the space pocket. When he touched the familiar disc, the heavy stone hanging in his heart finally fell to the ground, and he breathed a long sigh of relief. However, Maev's mood was not much relieved. She frowned and said worriedly, "Deathwing will definitely come back. Ethan, Malfurion, we must leave this dangerous place before he returns." They shook off the mud and snow from their bodies and continued to walk down the mountain carefully. Although the black dragon's violent roar echoed in their ears from time to time, fortunately, the giant dragon did not appear in their sight again. Despite this, the three of them still did not dare to be careless at all. They quickened their pace and hurried down the mountain. When they were about to reach the bottom of the mountain, Ethan stopped and looked down at the valley below, his face becoming solemn. "This place is very strange. I don't recognize it. I feel that we are too far away from Crassus," he said. Closing his eyes, he seemed to be trying to sense something. "Besides, I can't feel his presence now." Crassus may have been hiding. After all, the black dragon has been dispatched and is in an extremely violent state, Malfurion speculated after a moment of thought. But no matter what, we must find him and ensure his safety. After a brief discussion, the three decided to go down the mountain first and then make plans. They knew very well that time was tight and they had no time to stay and wait for Crassus. But they also believed that Crassus, as a lookout, might be in a much better situation than they were, who were running around. Soon, they entered the valley that was shrouded in darkness all year round. The towering mountains cast heavy shadows in the deep valley, like deep cracks. This time, Ethan, who had the strongest perception, walked at the front of the team, followed closely by Maiev, while Malfurion was responsible for holding down the formation. Even though they were far away from Deathwing's core territory, they still needed to be wary of a few cunning goblins popping up somewhere. They originally planned to turn left to return to the place where they parted ways with Crassus as soon as possible. However, after taking only a few steps in that direction, they were shocked to find that the front was already the edge of a cliff with mountains and rivers, and they could no longer move forward. Facing the desperate situation in front of them, Malfurion thought for a moment and suggested, "If we choose another direction, although it may take a long detour, we can still reach our destination in the end." So they immediately changed their route and chose an opposite path to continue moving forward. This road was covered with gravel and rubble left behind by the black dragon's violent behavior, and every step was treacherous. Navigating through the rocky terrain was extremely difficult. Fortunately, many gaps and paths formed between the rocks, providing unexpected convenience for their progress. They carefully moved through these gaps, staying alert to possible danger while searching for a way forward. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed in their ears. It was the roar of Deathwing, announcing his return. The three of them hurriedly pressed their bodies against the mountain wall, fearing discovery by the giant dragon. They held their breath and cautiously peered into the sky. Above them, the giant dragon hovered, meticulously scanning the area. Fortunately, Deathwing did not discover their hiding place and eventually disappeared into the distance. Only then did the three dare to step out of the shadows. "It's strange. We only saw Deathwing. Where have the other dragons gone?" Malfurion asked, confusion evident on his face. "I remember there should be other black dragons in the dragon lair." Neltharion would definitely not dare to let those black dragons participate in the search for the dragon soul. Ethan replied without hesitation. "The power of this disc is too immense, and it has an irresistible attraction for any user. If those dragons find the disc first, they would likely be unwilling to return the dragon soul to Neltharion, wanting to monopolize its power. The dragon soul is potent enough for ordinary dragons to defeat Neltharion. Neltharion knows this very well, so he chose to act personally to ensure the disc could be successfully found and fall into his hands. Black Dragon's suspicion inadvertently provided the three of them with significant help. Deathwing was wary, fearing his kin might find the dragon soul before he did. In the process of using it, Ethan had deeply experienced the majestic power of the dragon soul. He was cautious of the dragon soul and did not dare to fully unleash its energy, but even so, the dragon soul exhibited an exaggerated effect in his hands. Because his mind was firm, he was amazed by the power of the dragon soul while remaining vigilant about it. He used it with extreme restraint, not fully releasing its power. However, even with such caution, the power displayed by the dragon soul in his hands was staggering. Imagine if someone willing to be seduced by the dragon soul were in charge of this disc. The consequences would be even more thrilling and difficult to estimate. Even Deathwing fell under the temptation of the ancient god. An ordinary black dragon could not resist the corruption of the dragon soul at all. After obtaining the artifact, they would undoubtedly turn their back on everyone. If they could fully activate the dragon soul's power, any adult dragon could possibly defeat Deathwing. Chapter 778, 3 Agreements. They did not dare to delay and quickly continued their journey. Fortunately, they were able to find Crassus hiding in his previous hideout before Deathwing's scent could reach them. At this moment, Crassus had prepared a teleportation circle and was waiting for their arrival. Upon seeing this, the three people jumped into the magic circle without hesitation. Due to the emergency situation, this hastily constructed teleportation array had a limited transmission distance and could not directly deliver them to the resistance camp. Instead, they were teleported to a Tauren village, which was considered a temporary safe place. In the windswept high mountain, the mountains echoed with Deathwing's deafening roar. This former guardian of the earth had now turned into a crazed beast, frantically searching for the mysterious thief who had stolen the dragon's soul. Each search caused a significant commotion in the mountains, turning the once peaceful valley into a noisy chaos. The Tauren also felt this uneasy atmosphere. Although they didn't understand what was happening in the mountain, out of caution, they set up a defense line, and every soldier was ready to prevent the crazy black dragon from suddenly appearing. At this moment, Ethan and his three companions broke into the valley shrouded in tension and gathered half a dozen people. When the Tauren were still preparing for a possible war, they received shocking news from Ethan and the others. He was the one who caused the disturbance in the mountains, and Deathwing had actually been taken care of. This news made the Tauren's tense nerves relax a little. Later, in order to confirm the accuracy of the news, the chiefs of the 5 major tribes came one after another to discuss the matter of Deathwing with Ethan and the others. In the camp, the acting chief of the Gowling tribe, Lesser Gowling, looked sharply at the black dragon scale that Ethan casually threw on the table. After thinking for a moment, he was the first to break the silence. So, Deathwing and his Black Dragon Legion have no intention of attacking us now? Ethan crossed his legs easily, shrugged, and smiled. Deathwing's dragon soul has been stolen, and he must be searching for the thief all over the world like a headless fly. How can he still care about you? He paused and then added, as for the issue of the Black Dragon Legion, if that Black Dragon Prince Nefarian hadn't lied, they probably wouldn't be hostile to us now. I can tell you very clearly about the movements of the Black Dragon Legion, Maiev added for Ethan in a calm tone. They have no interest in attacking the Tauren tribe. Deathwing, also known as Neltharion to you, has not given them any relevant orders. In fact, the crazed Neltharion will not give any orders at all. The Black Dragons themselves are afraid of the mad Black Dragon King. As long as you don't provoke them, they should not attack rashly. Hearing this, the chief of Blood Totem, Desco Blood Totem, suddenly stood up from the animal skin chair, his eyes shining with a desire for battle. In that case, what are we waiting for? Master Juan is calling me. A battle, an unprecedented glorious battle awaits us. This is the time to win glory for the tribe. Ahor Rivermane, the chief of the Rivermane tribe, still seemed hesitant. He looked at Moda Skyhorn, who had just returned from a failure. The two exchanged glances, as if having some kind of silent communication, but they failed to reach an agreement. So, Moda Skyhorn thought for a while and raised his hand to speak. If your Night Elves' promise is credible, then I agree to send troops. I think we should put all the remaining main forces of the tribe into the battle. After all, the final battle is about the fate of the entire world. At this moment, we can no longer choose to stand alone. Ahur Rivermane's expression suddenly changed as Moda's attitude shifted. His face became so gloomy that it seemed like it could drip water. There was disbelief and faint anger in his eyes. Ethan found it difficult to accept this sudden change, but it wasn't over yet. The chief of the Woodhoof clan, Kulan, an old Tauren who seemed gentle and dull, was also present. Ethan had not seen him during his last visit to the Tauren, making this his first meeting with Kulan. From Kulan's cloudy but deep eyes, Ethan could read an unusual wisdom. Kulan looked around, noticing that the situation was gradually becoming clearer. He raised his trembling right hand and said with a kind smile, I also agree to send troops. I heard that the Pandaria in the south have sent reinforcements. Among them are many yak warriors. Hey, I think if we choose to sit back and watch, we may be looked down upon by these warlike distant relatives. You, Hermione pointed at everyone angrily. Seeing the two chiefs defecting one after another in a short period of time, he was so furious that he couldn't speak for a long time. Lassay Gowling, however, seemed much calmer. He nodded slightly. Now it's 4-1, so that's the way it goes. Please inform your subordinate clans to prepare for war immediately. Time waits for no one. We will try our best to prepare for the war in 3 days. Set out within a day to meet this unprecedented challenge together. During this adventurous journey, Ethan and the others not only obtained the Dragon Soul and successfully mitigated the potential threat of the Dragon Clan, but also resolved a major problem for the Tauren clan. The entire operation was a great victory. However, success often comes with new challenges. At this moment, the urgent issue they faced was not how to celebrate, but how to deal with the spoils obtained in this operation. The real focus of controversy was how to handle the Dragon Soul. This issue triggered a heated debate within the team. The controversy was mainly between Crassus and Ethan, whose views were diametrically opposed. Maiev had always been a staunch supporter of Ethan and stood by him without hesitation. Malfurion, on the other hand, was in a dilemma. On one hand, he and Crassus were comrades and partners fighting side by side. On the other hand, Ethan and Maiev were both of his own race. This situation put the already hesitant Archdruid into a difficult position. Crassus's attitude was clear. Ethan, the Dragon Soul should be handed over to our Dragon Legion for safekeeping. It is an artifact of our tribe, and we have the responsibility and ability to protect it. Crisis, I understand your concerns, but the Dragon Soul cannot be returned to you now. Ethan shook his head without hesitation and responded. I even hope that after we go back, besides revealing the Dragon Soul, the specific information about it now in my hands can be kept strictly confidential. He looked around at the people around him and then said, This secret can only be known to Tyrande, Jared, and a few Dragon Kings at most. Other members of the Resistance, as well as the dragons of the Dragon Legion, cannot reveal any information. It's not that I want to monopolize the Dragon Soul. Ethan took a deep breath and explained. In my plan, it will be an important weapon for us to fight against the portal and sneak into Aslan's palace. Once the information is leaked, not only will the demons be on guard, but more importantly, Deathwing may also come after us. The consequences are unbearable for us. Threats like Deathwing should naturally be dealt with by our dragon army, Crassus said seriously. Without the blessing of the Dragon Soul, Neltharion would not have been able to fight in the last war. He may not be a match for our dragon army. Ethan smiled slightly after hearing this and responded, I understand what you mean, Crassus. After stealing the Dragon Soul, the dragon army can indeed be freed and fully devoted to the battlefield. But we need to be careful and not let our guard down. Waste military experience at will. With that said, he turned to Malfurion. You don't want to see part of the power we use to fight demons be restrained by the Black Dragon, do you? Upon hearing this, Malfurion fell into brief thought and then nodded hesitantly, expressing his agreement with Ethan's point of view. Seeing that even Malfurion did not support him, Crassus's face turned slightly grim. He frowned in thought, obviously weighing the pros and cons. Noticing this, Ethan immediately struck while the iron was hot and proposed a new plan. Not only can we do this, but we can also further create rumors, claiming that the dragon soul was stolen by people on the demon side. After all, Neltharion does not know our true identity. In this way, Neltharion is likely to conflict with the demons. Not only can we solve a potential problem, but we can also create a new enemy for the demons, which can be described as killing two birds with one stone. This plan is indeed wonderful, Maiev admired sincerely, a flash of admiration in her eyes. We can use the power of the Tauren to spread rumors. Malfurion nodded in agreement, also putting forward his own suggestion. They live near High Mountain and know the terrain and conditions very well. If they claim to have witnessed a demon sneaking into High Mountain and such news reaches Neltharion's ears, he may believe it. Everyone agreed, and the plan was quickly finalized. Finally, Ethan turned to Crassus and said in a soothing tone, "Don't worry, the dragon soul is only temporarily stored with me. Once we solve the problem of the portal, I will return it to the Dragon Legion immediately." Seeing that the other three members of the team had already made their decisions, Crassus understood that any further opposition would be in vain. He sighed and had no choice but to agree to their plan. However, before finally agreeing, he solemnly reminded Ethan, "I will inform Queen Alexstrasza about this. She needs to know everything." Ethan nodded, expressing understanding and acceptance. He knew that this was the biggest concession Crassus could make. Chapter 779, I Should Be Under the Car. A carefully planned operation quietly unfolded with silent and tacit understanding. In the days that followed, the four of them busily began discussions with the Tauren tribe, weaving and spreading elaborate rumors. Ethan was particularly ingenious. Drawing from his previous experiences, he established contact with the Drogbars enslaved in the Black Dragon's lair, allowing them to become part of the rumor mill, thus greatly enhancing the credibility of the rumors. Not long ago, news that the upper elves and demons had appeared in the past few days spread rapidly in the high mountains. The once arrogant Black Dragon King finally fell into a trap. Under normal circumstances, Nesario would never be easily fooled due to his wisdom and vigilance. However, at this moment, he was suffering from the pain of his body tearing apart. The pain greatly affected his judgment, making it difficult for him to calm down and carefully distinguish the authenticity of information. To make matters worse, the whispers and temptations of the ancient god N'Zoth were like poisonous snakes, swirling in his mind, making his thinking chaotic. There was only one obsession left in his heart, to recapture the dragon soul and sweep across the entire world. When he learned that the dragon soul had been stolen by thieves from the Burning Legion and transported to Zinashari, Neltharion roared and changed direction without hesitation, like an arrow released from a bow, heading directly to the capital of the Dark Knight Empire. However, Ethan's time in High Mountain was short. Urgent news from the front line instantly made the originally calm atmosphere tense. According to Garod's letter, the war situation on the front line was grim and not optimistic. Although the Pandaren envoys had quickly arrived at the front line through teleportation and had urgent communications with Jared and other senior officials, the ordinary teleportation array could not compare with the super-large portal next to the Well of Eternity. The portal consumed a lot of energy, and the Coalition's portal could not directly connect to the Well of Eternity. Its delivery capability was limited and could only be used for the rapid deployment of small-scale elite troops. If they wanted to send large troops to the front line through the teleportation array, the required consumption was almost sky-high, and even the wealthy night elves could not afford it. Therefore, the Pandaren army had to rely on its own strength to embark on a long march. At this moment, their large army had just entered the land of Nazmir. The war on the front line was still supported by the Night Elf resistance alone. Faced with such an urgent situation, the four of them had no time to think about anything else. They packed their bags overnight and hurried back to the military camp. When Ethan was sent back to the front line, he felt a strange silence. The military camp, which should have been filled with energetic shouts and busy footsteps, seemed to be shrouded in dead silence at this moment. He looked around and saw the soldiers who had retreated from the front line to rest. Most of them had bandages on their bodies and were sitting tiredly in the shade of the trees. Their eyes were empty and confused, just staring at the ground aimlessly. The morale of the entire army had obviously fallen to the bottom. At this moment, Zolotath's gloating voice sounded in Ethan's mind. "Oh, I can feel the strong despair here. Is this army about to be defeated?" Ethan did not answer its question, but slapped the scimitar on his waist heavily and walked towards the main camp with a tense face. As he passed by the Sisters of Elun's camp, a call came from a familiar tent. "Ethan?" He turned his head and saw Tyrande walking out of the tent. Her shoulder was bandaged, and her left arm was in a sling, clearly injured. However, when she saw Ethan, a happy smile appeared on her face, as if any pain didn't matter. Ethan's attitude was just the opposite of hers. The moment he saw Tyrande's injury, his heart sank. Ethan couldn't help but feel nervous. Tyrande's weak left hand and the large amount of blood remaining on the bandage silently told the story of the battle and pain she had experienced. "How is your injury?" Ethan asked with concern, his eyes showing deep worry. Tyrande smiled softly and pretended not to care. "It's just a minor injury. It has been carefully treated by the sisters. Give me 3 days and I will be back to normal. You don't need to worry." But the next moment, her words were exposed. "Lady Tyrande, please stop holding on," Chandris Yue's voice came from behind. She held a new bandage in her hand and walked out from behind the high priest with a complaint on her face. Nodding politely to Ethan, Chandris turned her attention back to her master and adoptive mother. "Stop hiding this from Mr. Ethan," Chandris said, with a hint of reproach and concern in her tone. "Your hand was almost broken. Is this a minor problem? If it hadn't been treated in time, your hand would have been damaged beyond repair." After hearing what Chandris said, Ethan frowned, his expression becoming serious. "Your hand was almost broken. You went to the front line? How could you take such a risk?" He hurriedly took out a small bottle of rejuvenation elixir from his backpack and handed it to Chandris. "Use this medicine, just 1 drop at a time. It will take effect quickly and will be of great help in healing the wound." Turning to Tyrande again, with a bit of blame and fear in his tone, Ethan continued, "You are the new high priest. How can you rush to the front line so rashly? What if something happened to you? Sister Elun, what should we do? Your safety and health are of the utmost importance to all of us." "Oh, isn't Maiev still here?" Tyrande tried to resolve the tense atmosphere with a relaxed tone, putting on an indifferent expression. However, when she met Ethan's stern and deep eyes, her heart trembled, and she subconsciously shrank her neck. She clearly remembered that Ethan always treated her with gentleness and tolerance in the past. No matter what small mistakes she made, he would always forgive her with a smile. This was the first time she saw him so angry. Okay, don't be so angry. I promise I won't do this again." Tyrande also knew very well that she had gone too far this time, so she softened her tone and apologized gently. "The situation on the front line was really critical, so I had no choice but to do this. Then, it's impossible to hurt yourself like this." However, Ethan didn't seem to intend to let her go easily. He stared into Tyrande's eyes and said word by word, "You are Elun's chosen one. With her protection, how could you still receive such severe injuries? What on earth is Elun doing? And you too, do you know how to pray for help when you are in danger?" Seeing that Ethan was agitated and hurriedly speaking, even scolding the moon god Elun, Tyrande was at a loss for words and didn't know how to respond. There were many contradictions in her heart. On the one hand, as a loyal believer of the moon god, she was dissatisfied with Ethan's rude words. But on the other hand, she also understood that as Ethan was a favored person by God, it was okay for him to scold. Elun herself didn't say anything. More importantly, Tyrande could also tell that behind Ethan's words was deep concern for her. As her thoughts swirled, Tyrande decided to express her emotions through action. She walked gently to Ethan, stood on tiptoes, and pressed a kiss on his cheek, hoping to calm his agitated mood. However, at this warm and delicate moment, Malfurion accidentally broke into this small world that belonged to the two of them. He came here partly to visit Tyrande, but also to ask her to go to the tent. Several of their important people had returned to the military camp and brought back important information. Of course, Jared wanted to ask other people's opinions. As a result, we unexpectedly encountered this embarrassing scene. Seeing the intimate behavior between the woman he admired, Dee and his comrade, Malfurion felt numb all over. An indescribable emotion surged within him, making him feel as if he were in an absurd dream, confused and helpless. Who am I? Where am I? What do I want to do? I should be under the car, not here, witnessing how sweet you are. He was screaming crazily in his heart, but on the surface he could only stand stiffly in place, as if firmly trapped by a holding spell. He suddenly felt that since becoming a druid, the green leaves surrounding the pair of antlers seemed more vibrant and lush than ever before. At this moment, Tyrande also caught a glimpse of Malfurion. Seeing her former childhood sweetheart, she felt an inexplicable embarrassment. This embarrassment was not due to the unresolved relationship between her and Malfurion. Tyrande's character had always been very traditional, with a high level of loyalty. Since she chose Malfurion, in the original story, she had been ruthless towards Illidan. On one hand, she used Illidan in various ways to make him do all kinds of dirty work. On the other hand, when talking to Illidan, she always mentioned Malfurion intentionally or unintentionally, saying, "Don't come to me privately. I'm afraid Malfurion will misunderstand." Now, her choice was different from that in the original story. Ethan had replaced Malfurion and occupied the most important position in her heart. In this way, Malfurion might follow in Illidan's footsteps and experience that bitter taste. The Stormrage brothers might find some resonance in this regard and feel sympathy for each other. This way, the brothers might not break up like in the original story. Thinking about it this way, Ethan could actually be seen as a mediator, sacrificing himself to bridge the conflict between the Stormrage brothers and prevent them from turning against each other because of a woman. It is truly a great achievement. Ethan, if you two brothers can't control this woman, you have to let me do it. I can control it. However, traditional character also has its disadvantages. Tyrande was still a little shy about being intimate with her lover in front of her childhood sweetheart, so she gently pushed Ethan away, a faint blush on her face. At this time, Ethan also noticed Malfurion's arrival. He quickly withdrew his hands from Tyrande's waist and hips, and his whole demeanor immediately became more disciplined. Malfurion, worthy of being the future world leader, immediately showed his outstanding leadership and selfless spirit after just a moment of thought. Faced with the unexpected situation in front of him, he quickly adjusted his mentality, focused on the overall situation, and forced himself to stay calm. He conveyed the order for the meeting as if nothing had happened. After hearing this, Tyrande looked at Ethan with a wry smile, her eyes full of apology. "I'm really sorry. I have to go to work first. I will definitely come to you when I am free." After saying that, she and Shandis followed Malfurion's footsteps and headed to the big tent to discuss the next strategic plan. Chapter 780, Changes in Shin Isolin. "Ethan, is that girl your partner?" As they left, Zolototh's voice suddenly rang in Ethan's ears. "You two have an interesting relationship." "Yes," Ethan replied without looking back. "I didn't expect she was so seriously injured." He then turned his gaze to the almost endless demon army in the suburbs of Shin Isolin in the west. His eyes became deep and firm as he said in a resolute voice, "Our losses are getting bigger and bigger, and it has gradually reached a point that the Night Elves can't bear. We must end this war as soon as possible, and the hidden hand we left before should also be launched." As the war on the front line became increasingly tense, the demigods joined the battle one after another, trying their best to make up for the disparity in combat power between the rebels and the powerful Burning Legion. In the military camp, the tense and solemn atmosphere gradually intensified with the passage of time, making everyone feel that this difficult battle was becoming more and more intense. When Ethan stepped into the commander's tent, he found that apart from Garrod, who was in command, only a few officers with weak combat effectiveness were present. The air in the tent seemed to be frozen, and everyone's face was full of fatigue. Since he had learned the detailed information about Deathwing from Malfurion, Garrod did not try to keep Ethan. The communication between the two was very efficient. In principle, Garrod agreed with Ethan's previous tactic of using the Dragon Soul to raid the portal of the Well of Eternity. However, he also seriously pointed out that once this plan was implemented, it meant that the decisive battle with the demons had begun. This major decision would be incorporated into the overall design of the final battle and needed to be discussed in depth and carefully deployed at the upcoming conference. Ethan slowly turned around and stepped out of the main camp gate under the respectful military salutes of the officers. As he was about to leave, he heard some officers whispering in the tent. "How can we rely on those foreigners?" a voice muttered dissatisfiedly. "When the Burning Legion reinforcements did not arrive, we should have gathered all our strength and launched a frontal assault." Ethan smiled contemptuously when he heard this. For this view, he didn't even need to use his military talent. He only needed to think about the direction of this war in a strategic way to reverse the problem of this strategy. In fact, the Burning Legion had already seen the possibility of this happening. Therefore, shortly after the portal was opened, they quickly sent Manaroth as a temporary commander. After that, Archimonde personally visited the palace to demonstrate their determination and strength. In this high magic world, the strength of the Burning Legion is not only reflected in their huge military force, but also in the fact that they have a group of extraordinarily strong leaders. Legion leaders like Archimonde and Abyss Lords like Manaroth are not something that ordinary night elves can deal with. Only by asking the wild demigods or guardian dragons can they be effectively suppressed. However, it is not easy to ask these powerful beings. This requires a lot of time and energy to communicate and coordinate, and time is the most precious resource in this war. For this reason, as long as the generals of the Burning Legion still exist, the demons can still hold their ground in the early stages of the war, even if they are short of troops. In general, this magnificent ancient war has to wait until both sides have exhausted all their strength and squeezed out the last bit of troops before the final decisive battle. It is really a helpless move, and it is also the inevitable result of the development of the war after the two sides have fully played the game. "Mr. Ethan?" Leaving the hustle and bustle of the main tent, Ethan suddenly heard a familiar shout on the quiet path back to his independent tent. He turned his head and saw Elise running towards Hermione. With an anxious look on her face, two figures followed closely behind the girl. One of them was someone Ethan knew well, the second-generation druid, Landra Linge. However, what surprised him even more was the special companion behind Ali Lacey, a panda with a round figure and a simple face. How did these three get together? Ethan couldn't help but feel a mix of doubt and curiosity. He had heard from Jarod that the Pandaren clan had sent envoys to the front line through the portal in advance, aiming to pave the way for the incoming main force and establish initial communication and cooperation with the Night Elf resistance. However, the panda in front of him, with a fair complexion and no beard, seemed very different from the image of a diplomat. Although Ethan had never actually seen a panda in person, he had seen them in a zoo in his previous life. He was no stranger to pandas. This seemingly immature panda resembled the underage pandas in his memory, leading him to guess that this special envoy might not have officially reached adulthood yet. Judging from her petite and curvy body, she seemed to be a young girl. "What's wrong? Why are you in such a panic?" Ethan asked Elise with a somewhat reproachful tone. Something happened, Ethan." Elise rushed forward in a hurry, grabbing Ethan's sleeves tightly, her eyes full of panic and helplessness. "You know, we originally planned to build a new residence for the family in Black Crow Castle, but until today, the butler and servants have not arrived at Black Crow Castle." At this moment, more than half a month had passed since Ethan and the others left Zin Aislinn. Given the urgency of the situation, even if the Sun Chaser family needed to sort out and dispose of their property, they should not have delayed for so long without any response. Ethan frowned slightly, stretched out his hand, and gently comforted Elise. "Don't be afraid, Elise. Calm down. Did Mr. Dathrima send someone to deliver any news to you?" Elise shook her head, her voice trembling. No. Her trembling hands held Ethan's hand tightly, seeking some support from him. After all, she was still a child, not yet an adult. The great changes that had occurred in just 2 months had made her deeply aware of how narrow the world she lived in before was. Ethan shook his head in confusion. This is indeed a bit unreasonable. In his brief contact with Dathrima, he had understood the man's character. In his impression, Dathrima was a thoughtful person who would never neglect important matters. He also attached great importance to family, always personally handling all family affairs with great care. For such an important matter as arranging a retreat for the family, Dathrima would have put more attention and energy into it. However, to this day, his messenger had not been seen. What was going on? Ethan gently stroked Elise's soft hair, his deep eyes shining with thought. After a moment, he slowly spoke. Perhaps something new happened inside Zin Isolin, which made Dathrima temporarily unable to leave. But don't worry, we planned it together with Mr. Dathrima from the beginning. When rescuing Tyrande, the plan was very thorough, leaving no room for mistakes. I believe their safety should be guaranteed, and they would not be easily exposed. At this point, Ethan's voice gradually became lower, as if he were talking to himself. At least for now, they should be safe. His voice was so low that Elise did not hear his whisper clearly,